The following is a presentation of Sertoba Media and Comey Media Incorporated. All right, so it's the Chiefs, the Bills, the Eagles, and the Commanders. We'll touch on the divisional round and we will preview conference championship weekend. This is Total Football Talk. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome back to Total Football Talk. Hard-hitting news, grind action, and fun just the way you like it. I am one of the co-hosts of this illustrious program, Cole Johnson, of course, a.k.a. the mad scientist and the EP of all EPs. And when my other co-host joins me, I will give him a proper introduction. But we definitely are going to kick off, like I did that, the festivities of conference championship weekend. That will be in a 2-minute drill. But what we're going to do right now is we're going to go back, not way back, just to Sunday to Saturday. That's right. Opening drive, we review the NFL 2024 season divisional round.
All right, let's go. We got trips, right? At 42, 989. On two. Ready? Ready.
All right. Well, before we do get started, Dante Hill, my man Dante, he has many reasons to smile. New dad. His boys, the Eagles, are now in the NFC Championship game, and they get a chance to play their third consecutive home game in the playoffs. He says, "Guys, what's up?" Sig Diggy, all the way from Norway. He says, what's up? What's good, everybody? And I'll give you your greeting. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, sir. But good afternoon to you, Sig. Dante says, look, I told you, Cole, months ago what was going to happen. Put some spec on their name with 4 laughing emojis. He says, our road to the Super Bowl is so much easier. I never doubted you getting to this round. I never doubted you getting to the NFC Championship game. I doubted you getting beyond it, and not because of the talent. And you know why. You have heard me say why. And you've agreed as to why. However, I sort of agree with you too, man. If they had a choice to pick an opponents between, say, the Vikings, the Lions, or the Commanders, yeah. And then on top of it, all right. So if you play the Lions, you'd have to travel to Detroit. If you play the Commanders, you stay at home. Yeah, slam dunk. So yeah, I'm with you on that. And he says, yeah, I'd rather play a field ever than Detroit. I think they would too. All right. And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and children of all ages, here is the man who puts the energy in all of Total Football Talk. The man who is Mr. Commander's Gridiron Report, and he's going to put some extra stank on his next episode. I know it. Mr. In or Out Sports Debate, Mr. D. Willie in the evening, and whatever else you want to put him on. Ladies and gentlemen, one of the brightest football minds is about to regale you and entertain you, especially today. the one, the only, D. Willie, or Drew Willingham. What's up, man?
My man, it is great. We are back together again. You are looking like Hugh Hefner over there with the robe on
Yes, sir.
today as you
Yes, sir.
have some things to put out in this morning. I'm looking forward
Yes,
to
sir.
things you got to say. You're a bright football mind too, my man.
Thank you.
But we're down to the final four. We're
Yes.
down in one of those teams did not expect to be there. I may or may not be wearing the representation on my shirt today, but we will
No.
definitely get into that here within the next 2 hours.
And I've also promised him that I'll get to that later. But
yes, we got to let's keep that surprise for.
yes, we'll get that surprise. but here we go. All right, let's start with one of the Saturday games. And quite frankly, I think we're going to start with the game that I hate to say it because it involves my Texans. It's probably the least interesting of the four. Yes, I said it. The least interesting of the four. The Texans went to Arrowhead. They played the Chiefs. And you remember, I actually said on this program, the Texans can win this game if two things happened. If they didn't turn the ball over and if they did not commit any penalties. Well, they didn't turn the ball over. But I knew darn well penalties were going to fly. And boy, did they ever. And because those penalties flew, along with some big-time miscues on the Texans' end that had nothing to do with penalties, they fell hard to the Chiefs, 23-14. Now, I'll give you the stat that sort of irks me about this whole game at the end of this. But to the victor go the spoils. Patrick Mahomes, 16-25, 177 yards, and a miraculous touchdown throw to Travis Kelce off his feet. Beautiful throw. 7 carries for 14 yards further. One of those carries irks me as well. Travis Kelce, 7 receptions, 117 yards, a touchdown, and a view of Taylor Swift hugging Caitlin Clark after said touchdown. On defense, you had George Karlaftis, 4 solo tackles, 3 tackles for losses, 4 quarterback hits, and 3 sacks, pacing the way for the Chiefs defense to have 9 tackles for losses, 14 quarterback hits, and 8 sacks. Yes, you heard me correct. 8. That's right. The Texans offensive line was like, Olay! 8 sacks. Not to be outdone, Harrison Butker, he was reliable with his leg. He converted all of his 3 field goal attempts. C.J. Stroud. Now, I have to give this man credit. In fact, I had to give him a purple medal. 19-28, 245 yards, 6 carries, 42 yards, and he was getting hammered all game long.
Yes, he was.
Oh, my gosh, he was getting hammered. But he played all the game well, and I had to give him credit for that. His toughness meter for me has risen. Joe Mixon, I would probably have to say, other than maybe Will Anderson Jr. was the Texan of the game, but I probably would Anderson than I would Mixon. He carries 88 yards and a touchdown. He also had 2 receptions with 12. He paced the way along with Stroud in rushing 149 yards on the ground against the Chiefs defense. Nico Collins in the air, he had 5 receptions, 81 yards. Will Anderson Jr., man, he had a stud of a game. 4 solo tackles, 3 tackles for losses, 2 quarterback hits, and 2 sacks. And if he could have put the team on his shoulders, he would have willed the Texans to victory by himself.
Yes.
And Will, if you're listening to this, you got hosed on that rough and pass penalty first quarter. You got hosed on that, my friend. But the big time ire for me goes in the direction of Kaimi Fairbairn. If you don't know who he is, he's the place kicker for the Texans. 2 of 4 field goals. Yes, he missed 2 field goals. One was not even close to 55 yards. In fact, you probably could have put another set of uprights, and it was to the right of it. The other got blocked, and he missed his only extra point attempt. Now, here's the stat to me that really does it. The Texans outgained the Chiefs 300. I think it was like 315 and 320 yards to 215. It was some drastic variance of that nature. Any team that gained that many amount of yards over an opponent was, until this game, 49-0. Make that 49-1 because the Texans went down hard to the Chiefs. Your thoughts on this game, because I could go on a soapbox and just go ham on what I witnessed.
The game was so bad. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Cole. It was so bad.
It's horrible.
Oh, but it's not for reasons that you think I'm going to say at the same time. This game was so bad because the refs were bad. I agree with you, Dante. This game was bad because of the amount of penalties that were called. So many penalties were called. The Texans had 8 penalties for 82 penalty yards in this game, and the Chiefs had 4 of 29. It was lopsided when you look at the two.
Right.
They were calling more penalties on the Texans than they were on the Chiefs, and you could arguably look at the other side, and there was like 3 or 4 missed calls where there a face mask or a holding, or there was one hit on C.J. Stroud. I was like, where's the roughness call on that one? So I'm looking at this game, and people say that the Chiefs, the refs are in their pockets. Okay, they've said this for several times over the last several years, and there were many instances in this game where the prediction was not a spoiler in this one. It was, where we were saying this between several games before, pre-games, post-games, we're saying this stuff. And now we look at this game right here, and C.J. Stroud was tough. He looked better in this game than he did in the wild card round. Okay,
he did.
So he looked like he improved a little bit.
Yes, he did.
Like the number 2 and number 3 overall picks from the previous draft definitely are paying dividends for this team, and it's been paying dividends for this defense, which is a big reason why the Texans made the playoffs to begin with, because their offense was struggling this year. You and I were talking about that throughout the entirety of the year. We get to this game. Just like another game where we're going to talk about another team upsetting a number 1 team. This could have potentially happened in this past week's game. We could have seen the Texans. You and I were talking about it last week. We wanted to see it happen. We were being realistic and saying more than likely the Chiefs were going to win this game.
Yeah.
But for reasons why we said last week that the Chiefs were going to win, it definitely paid off in this game this past Saturday, because the Chiefs were getting calls that the Texans weren't. And you break it down and look at it right there, because there were no fumbles, there were no interceptions, there were no turnovers
at all.
0. So how can you
turnovers at all?
So how can you force turnover? How can you force things to happen in this game? You call penalties. So basically the game's going one way. The Texans only went for it on 4th down once, and the Chiefs went for it twice, converted only 1 of 2. So you got to do something with the game, and they weren't going beyond 3rd downs a lot, because you look at what the Texans did. They converted on 10 of 17, which is actually pretty remarkable against that Chiefs defense. That's a good conversion rate.
Right. That's a very good conversion rate.
When you're doing it against Chris Jones and other on that defense, that's still a big reason why the Chiefs had as much success as they did this year.
Right.
And you convert 18 first downs on this Chiefs defense, and you still only put up 14 points.
14 points.
In your time of possession, the amount of plays. Looking at statistically, this Texans team should have won this game. You had more passing yards. You had more rushing yards. They struggled on the day, the Chiefs did. They struggled on the day with moving the ball on the ground. They couldn't get a running game going to save their life. Kareem Hunt did have a touchdown.
Right.
But he's the leading rusher, 8 carries, 44 yards. Your next lead rusher is Pacheco with 5 carries for 18. There's no way that stats like these, if you would have had these numbers as the Washington Commanders against the Lions, you would have lost the game. Okay? So it just goes to show how great this Chiefs franchise is, because they're finding ways to win games with their defense. When you're Patrick Mahomes and you have less than 200 yards passing, 177 passing yards in this game, C.J. Stroud nearly throws for 250, has his top-tier running back who establishes the run over there for the Texans with 18 carries for 88 yards, and you're putting up the numbers that you did, and you just get Nico Collins back, who's been banged up this year. This Texans team's been banged up pretty bad, very similar to the Detroit Lions, but maybe a little bit worse. And you have stats like you do in this game, and you can't win. I'm sorry, but I'm not saying this was Tim Donaghy, okay, of the NBA. Like, I'm not saying this is that.
Not
But I
Tim
feel
Donaghy.
like somewhere, somehow, whether it was 1, 10, 12, or 2 dozen, it feels like the fix was in. Yes. I don't know. They grease the ball. Yeah, you can grease the ball or take a little PSI out the football. I don't know about all of that. We're not going to go back to Deflategate, Spygate. But what I am going to say is this. Something just felt off with this game. And even though Kelsey did what he did, he was the highlight of the Chiefs' offense because he had Patrick Mahomes only threw for 60 yards without Kelsey in this game, right? Because he had 177 passing yards. Kelsey put up his best numbers in a postseason matchup. 117 receiving yards with a touchdown, averaging nearly 17 yards per catch. Yeah. Kelsey was on fire and doesn't look like he's anywhere close to retiring. With him being where he's at in life at 35 years old, he played like he was 25 in this game because he never played like that in any other postseason, and they needed him to step up because they weren't getting it anywhere else. Xavier Worthy did okay, him being a rookie, 5 catches for 45 yards. I'm okay with that.
First start. Yeah, first playoff start. Yeah.
For his first playoff start, I'm okay with that. It's the people that I'm looking at that I'm concerned when I look at Kareem Hunt, okay? He is on the older side. This is his second go-around. Yep. But Pacheco, I'm concerned about with his numbers. I'm concerned about Hollywood Brown, who didn't get any. He had a target or two, but he didn't have any catches in this game. Where was DeAndre Hopkins, Cole?
That's who I'm concerned about the most.
Yes. Where was DeAndre Hopkins? How are you going to win games in the future when you have DeAndre Hopkins who has 2 targets but no catches? What in the expletive is happening out there for the Chiefs? If it was not for Travis Kelce stepping up in this game, we would be seeing the Texans move on to the AFC championship game. That's what we would be seeing right now because you had no running game. You had only take Travis Kelce out of it. You had no receiving game. The Texans got screwed with the amount of penalties. 8 penalties for 8 penalties for 82 yards is what it was. And the Chiefs had 4 of 29. The fix was in one way or another. I don't care how or what level. Somebody was jerking a chain somewhere or jerking something to make things happen.
Well, see, I'm glad I could be classy in this situation, and I could actually allow you to say all of those things. I don't disagree with you. I do think there was some funny business when it came to the Zebras. I'll admit that. And I mentioned it before I threw it to you. I got hot with the roughing the passer penalty in the first quarter on Will Anderson. I'm like, how in the heck you hit the quarterback in the chest?
That's the one I was talking about.
You don't touch his face. You don't touch his mask even, and you throw a flag on that. I'm like, come on. That to me was ridiculous. Now when Anderson and Tuoto collided together. Right above Mahomes when he slid, I almost can let that slide. But my thought process is, and unfortunately I hate to say it, I think it's going to be even worse. One of these quarterbacks is going to bait what Mahomes did bait into, and they're going to get tattooed even worse than him. And you're not going to like the results of it because you're having these offenders go hard, and you train them to go hard. Then they got to let up. When the QB just all of a sudden at a moment's notice decides to dip, but I can let that slide a little bit. But I still thought I'm like that was minimum contact. I've seen worse hits on a quarterback when they slid go, and not be flagged. So I'm like, okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead, man.
I was just gonna say you're talking about baiting. This is one thing you got to be concerned about when it comes to baiting. If he's a master of that, you got to stay clear of that.
Yes, he is. I mean, Mahomes has a PhD in baiting. I mean, he will bait a defender to get a 15, just cause. And he tried to do it with a flop. And the refs talk about refs. They didn't throw the flag on it because they saw, oh yeah, you trying to act like LeBron James. I'm sorry, that wrong program. But
Oh, oh, so we were up here. Oh no, it's not there. I thought we had it to click. No.
oh Lord. But yeah, I mean,
Oh, we do have it to click. But never mind. We'll go back to it later. I'll save it for later.
But okay, cool. But one of the things that I wanted the Texans to do, and remember, early in the season, I said to you, and there was a lot of people who were saying, well, yeah, this team can go to the AFC Championship game. This team could be an AFC title contender. I'm like, not yet. They have pieces. I mean, Will Anderson, Danielle Hunter, Derek Stingley, Kamari Lassiter, who I thought, okay, he probably needs this year to grow. That dude is a stud. On the other corner, I'm like, wow, this dude got talent beyond talent. I mean, just the defense alone, I'm like, okay, I think I know how they're going to do it this year. They were a little bit more aggressive offensively. I think they're going to try to not be as aggressive offensively. They're going to try to ground and pound, and they're going to try to rely on the defense to bring them home. And I'm like, okay, normally when that's the case, some growing pains is going to have to happen. And they had to do a lot of growing pains. People were talking ill about C.J. Stroud. Oh, yeah, we see regression with him. Well, I mean, it's not regression from the standpoint of the five in front of him regressed. Yes, even Mr. Pro Bowler himself, Laramie Tunsil. The offensive line regressed. And so I don't care who you are. I mean, we saw slippage with Patrick Mahomes when offensive line faltered for the Chiefs. Not this year, not somewhat last year, but a quarterback needs offensive line, and that offensive line was porous. You need no further evidence than what we saw Saturday. 8 sacks allowed, and that's just the sacks. We're not even talking about the hits he took, which were almost twice as many. That was counted. Mm-hmm. So I'd probably say they probably raised 70 plays. I'd say they probably ran 70 plays. C.J. Stroud took hits on half of them.
And a bunch of illegal ones, too.
That's what I'm saying. Some may have been illegal, but he took hits on half of them. So to me, that is where it broke down. So I'm like, no, C.J. Stroud didn't slip. The offensive line regressed. And unfortunately, that falls on him. Because he's going to press more, he's going to trust less, and he's going to force picks, and he's going to probably fumble the ball when he normally wouldn't.
But
that's
he didn't.
Any quarterback. But in Saturday's game, and this is why I said this is not on C.J. Stroud, and I'm glad you said that. But in Saturday's game, no fumbles, no turnovers, no interceptions. He took care of the ball. He did what he was supposed to do, which means he learned what he needed to learn, especially from last week to this. And to me, from probably the regular season to the playoffs, he learned he had to take care of the ball because he said, okay, I got to step up my game. The standard bearer for the quarterbacks is on the opposite side. And I know I'm going to have to play at least as good as I can to give us a chance. I think I have to play better than him to have us get a chance. And he did. He played better than Mahomes.
Oh, yeah.
So that game wasn't on him.
Oh, yeah, he played much better than Mahomes, and even though a game we haven't even talked about yet, the score was more lopsided, this game right here was more lopsided through and through because this one we knew based from the start with how the flow of the game was going, it just didn't look like it was going to be in the favor of the Texans.
Yeah.
As to where a game that we'll talk about in a little bit between the Commanders and the Lions, that game was close. It felt like it was closer even till the very last quarter, even into the last few minutes. As to where the way this game was dictated in Kansas City, you could just feel it. Regardless of how well the Texans played, no matter how much they didn't turn the ball over, no matter how much they protected, themselves the best that they could, they just couldn't do it. And even though they gave up 23 points, the defense didn't look as bad as most teams that would give up 23 points.
No.
Will Anderson, like you said, Those are probably historically, we want to say what we say about this year with Jaden Daniels being probably the best number 2 overall pick ever. And we'll get to that discussion here more likely in a little bit in comparison to CJ Stroud. But when you look at the best 2 and 3 picks overall, when a team
Anderson
has
is not a slouch. Oh my God.
back-to-back top 5 picks and especially
Yes.
that high,
Yes.
I can't remember any
Yes.
other team that has had those two kind of picks that high in the top 3, because we don't even have to say top 5 in the top 3, the
Top 3.
second and the third overall
Second and
pick,
third. Yep.
and making that great of choices for both of those picks.
Yes.
I could understand
Yes.
one of those hitting,
Mhm.
but you had 2 lottery picks,
And
both of them hit, and both of them paid dividends in this divisional round for you.
Yes.
As a
Yes.
Texans fan, I know today you have to be happy with what you saw
Yeah.
out of both of them,
Oh,
because
gosh, yes. Yes.
even though there was some things you want to clean up here and there, and primarily with your protection from your offensive line to your quarterback, because
That's
there's
the
been where
biggest
some gaping. That's been
That's
where
big.
what things you and I have talked about for the past
Yeah.
19, 20 weeks. Okay, literally, we've been talking about how this team has had some inconsistencies throughout, but one thing, CJ Stroud has taken more of a beating behind the line this year than he did last year, and what he
Much
was
worse than
accustomed
last
to.
year. Right.
And what he was accustomed to in college. He didn't take a beating like this.
Oh, he
but
didn't take a beating at all in Ohio State.
Yes, and he's proven how tough he is. One thing in comparison, I know we haven't really gotten to that game yet, but in comparison between last year's number 2 overall pick and this year's, with both of our teams and the quarterbacks, CJ Stroud does not. The only one thing I would say on his game that in a negative light in comparison to JD is he is not as good as escaping the sack. Okay, in eluding
Agreed.
pressure. When it comes to eluding pressure, CJ Stroud has a tougher time doing that, and it goes to show that a lot of that has to do with the pressures that he's facing from the other side. And this Chiefs defense is no slouch. But if you're going to be able to compete with them, you need to make some upgrades this offseason if you can, depending on what your cap space is like, which we'll break that down more in upcoming weeks. But they need to make some upgrades there within their offensive line. And we got to figure out this situation with the Chiefs getting a little bit of help, because let's hope that after this season, if they achieve this three-peat that they're going for this year, that we'll see that subside a little bit, because that has been plaguing not only the Texans in this situation, but many other teams over the past 7 years, Cole.
Many other teams.
Because this is something that what I'm bringing up right now is not new news. Okay?
No.
Sorry for the pun. All right, out there for those of you who are fans of certain other podcasts. But when it comes to this here and now, I hope that I wasn't out of class with that start of that statement when you came in and you were talking about that, because I was just trying to let you know out here that sometimes some of these games, it appears that the scales are tipped a little bit based on calls by another. And when you see one team getting twice the amount of penalties for 3/4 more of the amount of yards is what it felt like. One team has 29 penalty yards out of 4 penalties. The other team has 82. All right. That's a big, big difference. When you see that, you start to question certain things within the realm of this game. Might be a little frozen right there. Hopefully I am still going. But my man is frozen over here on the other side. But looking at how things are, hopefully I am not frozen. It looks like I'm moving out here in these streams. But there he is. He's back. Had you frozen for a second.
Oh, sorry about that.
Mr. Freeze.
I think I think you sort of caught what I was putting down when we predicted this game. When I said the Texans had to play a perfect game, no turnovers, no penalties, and the statement when I said we already know the Texans is going to get a lot of penalties. I think you sort of got how I felt about how the flow of the game was going to be. Because in my opinion, if all things were equal, the way the Chiefs have been playing the last couple of years, and if the Texans had an equal footing, it would have been an entertaining game. I'm not saying that the Texans would have beaten the Chiefs 10 times out of 10, but if they would have played the game that they played Saturday, and the referee issue was not going to be in play, Texas would have won that game. And I think that is what makes me happy about the Texans and what upsets me about the things about the Chiefs. It's like, wow, it's to the point where you have to play other elements, and I'm not just talking about the weather and the fandom. And it's like, dang, you got to overcome all of that to beat this team. And I felt that coming into it, but I was like, I'm not going to make an excuse, and I'm still not. The Chiefs were the better team in this game because you got to take advantage of your moments. And just with Ka'imi Fairbairn alone, they didn't. I mean, one missed extra point and 2 missed field goals. That right there. I mean, what's that? 7 points off his leg. So, and I mean, it still would have been a 2-point L, but still, that's 7 points. There's 7 points of opportunity that you can't lay the foot of the blame on the refs. You can't lay the foot of the blame. You can't even really lay the foot of the blame on the weather. Yeah, it was a little windy in Arrowhead, but still, you make adjustments to that. And just with him, I could say you account for 7 points that we didn't get. So I feel a lot better about the Texans this offseason than I did in the last, not necessarily in terms of going forward as a team. In terms of, all right, how much further do they need to grow in terms of getting to that next level? Because the second half of last year's game, when they were in Baltimore in the divisional round, and they got boat raced in the second half, I was like, whew, yeah, the Texans need to do a lot of things to be up to where the big boy is supposed to be. They're not even close to there yet. I'm coming away off of this game saying they're getting close. So I feel better about that. Now, can they build up a strong offensive line? That is another story of another time. Hopefully they do. They need to. But the Chiefs were a better team. Texas, you had a great season. Sorry you had to go out the way you did. And other people think that you did not lose that game fairly. And not just Texans fans. So you know that. But to the Chiefs, the fit to go to spoils. To the AFC Championship game you go. Congratulations to you for the 7th consecutive season. Dang. Mahomes is 7-0 in the AFC Divisional Round. Jeez. Whew, that's ridiculous. Lifty Nation. Oh my gosh.
Look at these comments.
Oh my gosh.
We got a little time to play with. We're not covering 74 games today. Let's see what these people
that's true.
say out here.
Yeah. We are.
A little bit of flux.
Dante, I love this. He said the Texans were supposed to grab patty flags. Well, yeah. And Seahawks fan extraordinaire Justin Henry, one half of excuse me. No credentials required. It's good to see you, my man. He says the calls on the Texans ridiculous. Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree. And welcome to the show, my brother. Glad to see you, man. Glad to see you.
Welcome back.
Dante went on to say, the only controversy is the fact they lowered their head at Patty. You should have known better. Everyone watching knew what was going to go on. You don't lower your shoulder on helmet, and on Patty, use your hands. Well, yeah, you know that wasn't going to happen. But yeah. Let me see. Oh, of course, Dante being the Eagles fan, wanting to get back at 2 years ago when they took it on the chin to the Chiefs. He says, I want the Chiefs. Revenge. Evil face emoji. Dante also says, look, Silk, my bladder and blood pressure is down now, but I believe I was hot.
Yes, he was. I was talking to him throughout that game. We're going to be talking about here in a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Some type of way.
Yeah. Silk says, new upgrades in the Texas offensive line would be a wonderful start. That's where they need to start. I think that's where the concentration has to be from draft and free agency. They need to have impact players on the line because it got to They have to protect C.J. Stroud. Have to.
Basically,
not,
what I was saying.
Yeah, Drew hit on the head. That is a must. You do not draft this guy number 2 overall and just have him out there to be tossed in the wind. You got to find ways to protect him. Justin agrees with you, Drew. He says, I feel it's sort of like the Patriots Brady thing with the Chiefs during their run. It says, everything seems to go KC's way when they need it.
Except for it's more so the refs that are leaning on this time. The Patriots just found other ways to cheat. Like, I mean, they had some help, but they didn't have as much help they cheated more. Okay, you have Deflategate, you have Spygate, you probably have Crisco Gate out there, but nobody's talking about that one.
The Crisco Gate. That would Crisco Gate. That probably would be with
Brady was a former baseball player. You might need a little bit extra curve on that football in tough scenarios.
Yeah,
cut through wind out there when it's like 10 degrees out there. Crisco Gate might help your way.
Yeah, well, unless you're Mark Andrews.
I'm looking forward to hearing that one.
Playmaker. It's time for you to come front and center, sir. He says, all right, I'm here to face the music. Let me have it. And you shall. So we will go Sunday. I said we will go Sunday. The early afternoon tilt between the Rams and the Eagles. The Rams coming off a wonderful performance of 9 sacks of Sam Darnold in their desert victory, 27-9 over the Vikings. The Eagles, basically in a pedestrian manner, they discarded the Packers 22-10, but it really wasn't much of anything. The game was ho-hum. This game, though, was pretty interesting. It was 16-15 going into fourth quarter. And then you had 2 back-to-back possessions, and then a 78-yard romp by Saquon Barkley. That pretty much was the nail in the coffin. The Eagles, in a wonderful snowy Lincoln Financial Park field, they went on to beat the Rams 28-22, and they will host. You hear me correctly. Host the NFC Championship game. And you're probably saying, well, why do you say host? Well, we will touch on that in the next game we will cover. Jalen Hurts, extremely pedestrian yet again. 15-20, 128 yards. He did have 7 carries and 70 yards on the touchdown. 44 of that was on his touchdown run early in the game. Saquon Barkley definitely was key in the game. He did not get 255 yards against the Rams, but on 26 carries, he got 205. So as many sacks as the Rams could get, they could not touch Saquon at all. Gap discipline was gone. I'm sorry, my bad. And he scored a touchdown. Also 4 receptions of 27 yards as well for him. He and Hurts on the ground paced the way for the Eagles offense to gain 285 yards on the ground. Now, normally this is a stat you would see for throwing. They ran for 285 yards against the Rams. Wow. On defense, Jalen Carter was the stud. And I'm going to say this to you, Dante. It's time this man wakes up, because I believe your defense needs to center itself around him. 2 tackles for losses, 3 quarterback hits, and 2 sacks. And that man was a disruptor du jour at the end of that game. He basically was the one who closed the game for you. He closed the game out. He saved a potential touchdown to be thrown on that last possession. A sack and a hurry. I mean, that dude was a monster in that game. And shout out to Tuck on it. And help me out, Dante. Linebacker. Fourth quarter, I kept seeing his name, and he ends up getting a fumble recovery. I think he recovered Stafford's fumble. That dude had a beast of a 7-minute stretch. Ooh, yeah, your defense is awesome, bro. Uh, Speaking of the Eagles defense, 10 tackles for losses, 10 pass defenses, and 5 sacks in the game. Jake Elliott, he made all of his 3 field goal attempts. And then we get to Matthew Stafford. Now, I'll give him credit. He did not throw a pick. 26 of 44, 263 yards, 2 touchdowns. He did, though, with 2 carries of 5 yards. Dang. You can't fumble, son. Kyron Williams, he had a pretty good game. But unfortunately, he also lost a fumble in the fourth quarter. Puka Nacua, he was non-existent the first 3 quarters, but he came up big in the last. 6 receptions, 97 yards. Jared First on the other end, he was talking bad noise toward Eagles fan, and he tried to lift the Eagles defense up. The Rams defense up. 4 solo tackles, 3 tackles for losses, 2 quarterback hits, and 2 sacks. And the Rams defense, they put poor Jalen Hurts to the ground 7 times. Also had 10 tackles for losses as well. A pretty good game, but this seemed to really go the Eagles' way in terms of the physicality. Your thoughts on this one, sir?
All right, before I drop the hammer, because I am dropping a hammer in this one, did Playmaker get an award?
He did. Well, he received something, an accommodation for Ramley Talk. One of his shows. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. I did not see that, so my apologies for being under a rock. I wanted to start out the dropping of the hammer with something positive because I saw this, so I want to extend the congratulations to Playmaker because this is the first time that I'm just seeing this or hearing about this. So congratulations to Playmaker from myself. I'm going to give you some good stuff now. That was the good stuff. Let's get to the bad. All right, talking about the Rams. That's why I saw that. I wanted to start it off with some positive. It's about to get real harsh for a second. All right, you lose by 6 points. All right, I had picked the Rams to win this game, and they should have won this game because of how bad Jalen Hurts was playing. All right, Jalen Hurts was absolutely terrible, and I'm about to explain why here very shortly. But when your running back and your quarterback, like you said, give up the football and just straight
back-to-back
hand it on over.
Mm.
Yes, like Christmas and the holidays, whatever you celebrate, all that's over now, okay? The gift that keeps on giving stops. We're mid-January, almost end of January. It is almost time to be buying heart-shaped boxes, okay? So presents are almost near, I guess, for some of you out there who just celebrate meaningless holidays. But you can give out gifts all you want to. But that's what exactly happened in this Rams game. Because between both fumbles, that's how this game was decided, in my opinion. Because, yes, the weather and the conditions were harsh. And I hope it's not like that this upcoming Sunday. But either way, that quarterback on the other side, he's going to figure out how to decimate you. And we'll get to that here in a little bit. Because I got a lot to say with my 10 minutes. Okay? My 10 minutes are going to be something special today. All right? But here and now, when it comes to this game, when you're playing in the nice, warm, well, extremely warm conditions of Los Angeles right now, but when you're used to playing in the warm conditions and the nice weather, when we get to situations like this in playoff football, it just goes to show the inexperience of being able to play, and that was for the majority of the team. When you have someone like Matthew Stafford, who has a lot of experience in playing in cold weather with his time in Detroit, not actually in Detroit because they play in a dome, but who he plays
Chicago
in the division
and Green Bay,
between Chicago, Minnesota, and Green Bay.
Well, they play indoors in Minnesota, but yeah.
But you still got to walk outside. But that's the same thing as Detroit. So, still, being around the weather, playing in 2 bad cities as far as Green Bay and Chicago, like you were saying, like we were talking about, but you still have to commute and move around in tough weather and conditions in Minnesota and Detroit. So you don't escape it.
True.
And they have outdoor practice facilities they are preparing for Chicago and Green Bay in their own locations because they live there and they can practice in those. My point is that Matthew Stafford in his 10, 12 years in Detroit, he wasn't. He was accustomed to playing in bad weather. So
yeah, he
for
wasn't
him,
phased. Yes.
in the penalty that he had with that fumble, which that ball was just smacked right out of his hand. I mean, he's holding it. He's standing there. The stance that Matthew Stafford had on that play when he fumbled that football, I was very surprised to see the nature of it, because it's not like he ran and it got popped out. He's standing there. It's in his hand, and it just literally, he smacked his hand, and the football, it just floats on the ground. Okay. That to me wasn't more so a result of the bad weather. That was him not tucking the football, him not being aware of his surroundings, a little late in his decision making, I would say, because you take away that fumble in itself, and the Rams convert and they score on that drive with a touchdown, which would have been possible. They would have won by 1 point.
Game would have been over there.
29-28. That would have been a completely different game in that point. So
Yeah.
when I sit here and I say I want to go off on them, I'm primarily going off on Matthew Stafford because, you know, even though he didn't throw an interception, that fumble paid big dividends.
Yeah,
he had nearly 20 incompletions. Nearly, I say, because he had 18. But
18.
163 passing yards. This game, I was talking about how the last game we were talking about was more lopsided in the fact of how things were with the refs. But this game, the Eagles should have lost. When you look at the fact of Jalen Hurts, even though people would say 5 incompletions, that's not that bad, but 128 passing yards, you expect more out of them because they're used to playing in these conditions. Yes, he had 70 yards on the ground, but he did that on just 7 carries, and he had a touchdown. Saquon was the big pivotal moving force for the Eagles offense because he had 26 carries for 205 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. He even added another 27 receiving yards. And just the Eagles offense between the two of them and a little bit of help from Gainwell, they, like you said, they had 285 rushing yards. Overall, with the fact that Jake Elliott knows how to kick in terrible conditions, because his footballs he was kicking was cutting right through the wind. And you can even tell the way he was kicking was different than usual.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was primed for this situation right here.
Yeah.
For the Rams, it was definitely not that case, because even though Josh McCarty made his 2, this was not made for the Rams to win in special teams.
No.
The biggest effect that they had, because their defense wasn't horrible, but at the same time they couldn't really contain Saquon, and that was what really outdid their defense. But had it not been for that one, if they would have taken away one of those 2 fumbles for the Rams, they would have found a way to win this game, I believe. And both of them cost them, but I feel like you take one of them away, and that one that was a big momentum shifter when Matthew Stafford did fumble that football in the second half, I feel like you take that one away, we're talking about a different result at the end of this game today.
Well, we could do simple math on that one. You take away the Kyron Williams fumble, and you take away the Matthew Stafford fumble. Both of those fumbles led to field goals for the Eagles. The score would be 22-22. So we may have it worse going to overtime. So both those fumbles were very, very costly. And I agree with you. If one of those fumbles didn't happen, the Rams may have found their way to get a W. And thank you, sir. Saquon, that was the name I was looking for. It was like every play in that stretch where both Williams and Stafford fumbled, I kept seeing 53. I kept seeing Bond. I'm like, dang, he's on every play. He flew around. To me, he was the star of that first the first part of the fourth quarter. I was like, man, that dude is just all over the ball. And then to me, Carter took over defensively the rest of the way. But I mean that. What I noticed, it sort of was like a tale of 2 games too. And I'm sorry, Stafford did throw over 300 yards. My bad. But it was like a tale of 2 games. Like the first quarter and a half before the snow started to really fall, the Rams seemed to really hang well and seemed to flow well with the Eagles. Whatever they wanted to do, even with Saquon and not being able to stop him. But to me, a portent of things to come was basically having wide open lanes for even Hurts to run through I'm like, well, if you're gonna have wide open lanes for Hurst to run through, you know they're gonna be wide open lanes they'll have him for Saquon, and he'll hit those holes faster. So, yeah. But when snow wasn't falling, the Rams seemed to play pretty well, at least offensively for sure. But man, when that snow started to fall, man, the Rams offensively just simply they seemed stuck until the touchdown drive and the last drive. Uh, it was as if they really didn't know if they could go deep. They didn't know if they could actually throw an immediate. So they only tried screens and running the ball for a good long while. And because of that, I think that stopped the whole momentum of the Rams. And we're not talking about them being routed. I mean, it was 16-15 going in the fourth quarter. I mean, when the Rams got the ball to start the fourth quarter, the play before that was a safety. So the Rams had the momentum. It wasn't as if the Rams could not play in that condition. I think for some reason they seem to be a little too conservative on offense. Crazy as that is, but I think they were a little too conservative on offense, and it hurt them. It hurt the whole team that they were, especially when they had the momentum, and it just hurt them. But, oh well, they go home. The Eagles with Saquon having a big game and Jalen Hurts having another game where Eagles fans will complain about him and Nick Sirianni yet again. But it doesn't matter. They're in the NFC Championship game for the second time in 3 years. I mean, what can you do? I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, that is the formula for the Eagles.
Am I allowed to call him his nickname for him?
Go ahead.
I can?
Yes.
I can say that word?
Yes.
I call him Nick Pissy Pants because that's what he looks like every single time he gets upset out there on the field. If you want a coach that you cannot relate to out there, go ahead and hire Nick Pissy Pants because he's going to be available here real soon.
Nick Pissy Pants? Oh, Lord.
Yes, because when another upset happens, let me just save that. I still have the floor here in a few minutes.
You will have the floor in a few minutes. Yes.
But go ahead and hire NP for his services.
Oh my gosh. But before we do get to that game, congratulations to the Eagles. They advanced to the NFC Championship game, and as I said, they will host that game. The Rams, they go home, but I think you all have a lot of good pieces to build on. The only issue is who's going to replace Matthew Stafford soon, because I think you're going to have to start thinking about that question sooner rather than later.
Because when you before we go to the next segment, when you look at how the results of the last game when they won against the Vikings, and I was saying it then when he had that football up over his mouth at the end of the game and he was talking when he was talking to certain individuals, I felt very similar resemblances to that when Peyton Manning was going up to Bill Belichick in the AFC Championship. And saying it was his last rodeo.
Probably his last rodeo, last ride.
And that might have been what Stafford was doing against the Vikings, and we could have seen that potentially end this past weekend. Not in the way that it went for Peyton Manning in his final year, but do not be surprised if we're sitting here in about a month or two, and we're talking on a Monday when we're talking about moves in the offseason and the fact that we could be discussing the retirement of Matthew Stafford and how Aaron Rodgers could still be playing football.
Oh Lord, Aaron Rodgers is a Ram. That would suck. But
I don't know about his. I don't think he'll be a Ram. He'll be a Ram. But I still think that Aaron Rodgers is going to play because he's like 4 or 5 touchdowns behind Brett Favre as far as being able to pass him.
And I'm sure he wants to pass him. And I know
he's at 507. Yeah, and especially, he doesn't. I don't think he wants to go out that way. If he goes out and throws another 10 touchdown passes next year, he'll be able to say at least he was able to come back for another full year and he passed Brett Favre, which we'll have a lot more to talk about throughout that season as well. Sure. Captain Ayahuasca. But here for the Rams in this game right here, if that's how he goes out, that's sad. And I don't think that he's going to go out that way considering how things went on his last play with the turnover. I don't think that I think that he potentially could come back, but I'm just sitting here saying don't be surprised if we're sitting here discussing that in the next month or so. But
Agreed.
regardless, at least if this is his last season, unless it led to Playmaker getting accommodation for the Ramley talk. So I am happy for that.
Oh, I'm happy for that too. I'm happy for that too. All right. Before we get to the next segment, because I know my brother is frothing at the mouth, we'll get to a little more comments. Now, Mr. Playmaker, he says, yeah, that Kyron Williams fumble, yeah, that hurt more. Yeah, it hurt because it stopped momentum for the Rams. I think that's what hurt because you got the ball, you were down 16-15, you got the safety, and now you have the ball. If you get a field goal, you're up, and you barely get started, and all of a sudden, yeah. So I can see how you would say that hurt more. I can see that.
I get it, but at the same time, like your leadership and the one who led you to the Super Bowl, I feel like to me that kind of hurts you more because you should expect more out of Matthew Stafford, and there's certain points within this game to kind of let you down when it came to that.
Yeah,
and that was one of them.
True. Dante says, "Look, Jalen was trash. Unnecessary sack after sack. I don't get why we didn't run it more. I don't either. Seriously, I don't either. And that's why I don't. That's why I don't really sweat Hurts throwing for as little as he throws it. Because to me, if I'm a defensive coordinator, I'd say 26 ain't beat me. Number one has to beat me with his arm. I mean, because I think you can get to him. I'm not saying he's incapable of throwing for over 300 yards, but you stand a better chance of beating them if he does.
And he also surprisingly, when it comes to Jalen Hurts, he wasn't even the least productive quarterback who got a win this week. As far as when it comes to from the pocket and passing, which we'll talk about that more here in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But he still put up numbers on the ground. So definitely big for him and what he did in this game. He made up he tilted the scales with his legs rather than with his arm.
Yeah, and I was going to say, and in this game, it was, well, he gained 70 yards and got a touchdown off his legs. So that sort of helps. But yeah, you have to force him to not run the ball and force him to be in the pocket. That's what you got to do. I would want him to beat me that way. But the way the Rams were playing defense, the way the Rams defense was set up, I'm sorry. Dante says, yeah, thank the Giants for Saquon, and I thank the Falcons for Jalen. There you go. That's what I'm talking about. The gratitude and spirit, Dante. I love that. He says, look, we should have won this game by far more points. It was just poor decision-making. Brown dropping that big pass. Oh, that was a gorgeous pass that Hurts did throw that he did drop. Hurts forgetting that he's in the end zone, the safety. And why call a pass back killing more and Hurts?
But he made up for it on that fourth down catch that gave him the first down there at the end.
He did.
So I see where you're going with that. And I know exactly what you're talking about, but at the end when they needed that first down, when it was snowing expletive off, and they needed to find a way to convert that first down, A.J. Brown came up big then.
Yeah, he did. And Dante also said, yeah, I can see your point, Drew, that the Rams probably should have won that game. But if we make extra points plus take away an unnecessary safety, it's still a 4-point game in the Eagles' favor. Yeah.
He still stood up when he needed the full 3 points, though.
That's true. Mick, what's up, brother? It's good to see you, man.
Glad Mick, welcome back. Click that like button.
Don't subscribe. That's right. He says for Drew, the Playmaker. Ramley Talk was ranked 55th in the top 100 of Los Angeles podcasts and second in the top 5 of NFC West podcasts. So
nice.
Congratulations, brother. Yeah, he told me the news yesterday. That was good. I was so happy for him. But he says in the game itself, it was a tumble from the Rams end. Blown blocking assignments, inaccurate passes, turnovers. You're missing one other element, though, Playmaker. Horrible gap discipline on the defensive line. You mean to tell me that you are playing a team that they gashed you for 255 yards? So off the bus, the defensive line didn't have Stockholm syndrome and say, Saquon Barkley can't get off past the line. Saquon Barkley can't get past the line. Saquon Barkley can't get past the line. You mean to tell me they didn't think that? Gap discipline failure. Because there's no way that he should have followed that 255-yard performance in the regular season with a 205-yard performance in the playoffs. So yeah, I put the most of the blame of that on them. But oh well. Oh well. Oh well. Oh well. Now, for those who are new to this wonderful place, be sure to subscribe now and never miss out on any new content that comes from either Search Over Media's YouTube channel or the Common Media Corporate YouTube channel. Playmaker says, look, I put that game in the offense. Yeah. This was I'll say this, Playmaker. It was a total team loss because the offense shouldn't have turned the ball over the way they did. They should not have been grounded to a halt as soon as they saw White on the ground. And defensively, although they got out to Hurts, 7 sacks is nothing to sneeze at. Even before that touchdown run, if I'm not mistaken, Barkley already had over 100 yards in the game. So there you go. Oh, man. What's up? The monarch of wrestling and the hardest content creator that I know because he has so many podcasts named Funny. Cool McCain. What's up, my brother? It's good to see you. I know you happy, brother. You along with your ego compadre Dante. You got to be smiling. Hosting an NC Championship game. Oh yeah, I know you happy today. And speaking of why you're hosting instead of traveling, let's go back to Saturday night because I believe I owe my brother this. The Detroit Lions, #1 seed in the NFC. They were a double-digit favorite coming into Saturday night and coming into town where the upstart Washington Commanders, and even though the Lions had their bye and they had their King of the North battle where they successfully beat the Vikings to earn the #1 seed, the Commanders came off of a doink off the right upright into the divisional round to play the Lions. And this was probably the most entertaining game of the week for 2 quarters, maybe 2.5. But I'll be doggone, the team in white actually controlled the game for the most part against a team wearing the Honolulu blue. And it turns out the Commanders went into Ford Field and garnered the upset of the week, 45-31. Let's touch on Jaden Daniels. No, I'm not going to touch on Jaden Daniels yet. I'll touch on the rest. I'm going to save the best for last. Austin Eckler, and I needed to see more of him, and finally we did. 6 carries for 47 yards and a good run that basically led the way to basically say, Lions, you're done, you're out on that drive. 4 receptions for 41 yards. So Eckler actually bringing the what he did with the Chargers finally over to the Commanders to actually do it in the way that I think they saw he would do it. Well, he, along with Daniels and others, Brian Robinson Jr., Chris Rodriguez, for example, a total team effort. They combined for 182 rushing yards on the ground. Terry McLaurin, 4 receptions, 87 yards and a touchdown. And again, as I said last week, I continue to say it, I believe you have found another weapon in De'Ami Brown. Another good game. 6 receptions, 98 yards for him. On defense, Dorrance Armstrong did his thing. 2 tackles for losses, 2 quarterback hits, and 2 sacks on the night. And then we get to Jared Goff, and he was harassed all game long. 23 of 40, 313 yards, 1 touchdown, but 3 interceptions. 3. And a carry of 7 yards. I'll touch on who were the beneficiaries of interceptions after I get to another stat. Jahmyr Gibbs, good stat. Unfortunately, they could not stick with him the way the game was flowing. 14 carries, 105 yards, 2 touchdowns, 6 receptions, 70 yards. He was pretty much the reason why the Lions even were afloat in the game. The Lions offense, they passed for 320 yards. They rushed for 201. Amon-Ra St. Brown, 8 receptions for 137 yards. And then we get to Jameson Williams. He had a reception for 19 yards. He had a carry for 61 yards off of a reverse on a touchdown. He was also 0 for 1 with the pick. And those who benefited from the picks, I should say, Mike Sanverstill, I'm sorry. He had not just one, but 2 interceptions. Jeremy Chin, he had a pick. And then, to me, the play of the game, the Quan Martin 40-yard pick 6. With the game then 24-21 in the favor of the Commanders. Goff threw a pick to him. He returned it for 6, which made it 31-21. And the game really wasn't that close. And now the star of the game, Jaden Daniels, the rookie quarterback. He ain't no rookie. 22 of 31, 299 yards, 2 touchdowns, 16 carries, 51 yards, and 0 turnovers. All of those stats, and did not turn the ball over at all. Wow. Now, I actually said this to my partner. I said, brother, I said, if the Commanders win against the Lions, you have 10 minutes to gloat all you want. So right now, I cede the floor to him. His Commanders will now be traveling to Philly to play against the Eagles for the NFC Championship game for the first time since George H.W. Bush was in office. W was not in office. George H.W. Bush was in office. 1992 was the last time they went there. So now, as promised, I'm a man of my word. D. Willie, do your thing.
I think what I'm going to say, certain things I'm going to say are going to surprise you, Cole. First of all, I want to acknowledge a comment Dante has been spot on, except for he is wrong about one thing. It wasn't until last week that I believe that is incorrect, because I did say they were going to beat the Buccaneers, and I have called certain things throughout this year that other people thought was crazy, and I was right. So I've been saying Jaden Daniels was him for several weeks. To those of you who've been watching this show consistently every single week and not being fair weathered and not being fake, you've seen exactly what the expletive I've said every single week, and same thing with Cole every single week. So just to remind you of that, I'm going to click one button for a minute to show you what I said last week.
Any final thoughts you have before we let the tribe go?
Yes, Detroit Lions and your fans, you need to go back a little over a decade and watch an episode of The Breakfast Club when Birdman was on it. And just like he said, you need to put a little speck on my name. You need to put a little speck on the name of the Commanders, because you are not showing the speck. I'm already seeing some things from a man Hawk that I'm very disappointed about on Instagram story. And I'm going to clip this out and I'm going to show it to you when I come into work today. Because you need to put a little speck on the name of the Commanders. They're going to come in there. They might not be biting off your kneecaps like you bite off others, but they're going to be hungry too. And they're going to run around, and the game is going to be a little closer than what you think. You may win, even though I'm going to sit here and tell you that you're not. It's over. The Commanders are going to win, and they're going to upset you, and you're going to get beat by him, JD. It's ironic that it hasn't even been a year since I had this championship belt made. With the W, that doesn't even stand for the Commanders, it stands for Willywood, my nickname within the wrestling realm when I do my promos on their wrestling podcast. Now, when it comes to this, it fits when you have the Commanders Gridiron Report and the things that I have said over the last 2 seasons. When I started that program, that team absolutely sucked. They were 4-13. They were terrible. I was sitting here and telling you how bad they were. But it just goes to show you, when you make some changes within your culture, when you're forced to sell the team, which thankfully in my lifetime we're going to the NFC Championship while I'm an adult, because the last time they made it was in 1991 and I was 5 years old. Let me read something that was written to you pretty much by Hollywood. Washington played Dallas on November 24th, 1991. They also played the Eagles on December 22nd, 1991. They played those teams the same identical dates this past year. Tell me that's not destiny. Tell me it's not destiny for us to go into Philadelphia and show them who is their daddy in 2024, because it's going to happen for the second time, and this time with Jalen Hurts. When you have Jalen Hurts playing like he did this past week, you can't just rely on his legs. And if we could stop Sonic and Knuckles in Detroit, we could stop your punk expletives at home too. And I'm saying this because we are rivals. And this week, prepare for the smack talk, because it's coming. And somebody asked me to talk smack this week, and I'm going to talk it while I have the floor today, because tomorrow's not guaranteed. Right now is, because we're alive and we're talking sports. What I have to say is, for the first time in 33 years, the Commanders, thank you, Cool McCain, the Commanders, and, formerly known as the Washington football team, Washington team of football, hashtag WTF, because that's how they were playing for quite some time. The team, the organization, everything was playing that bad for quite some time. Me growing up as I will say it now, if you got to bleep it out on the other program, I'm sorry, Cole, but growing up a Redskins fan, okay, going to school. Going to school with the swag on in the 90s when they were absolutely terrible. Do you know how the kids were mean? Okay, let's just say it like that. They were mean to me in the 90s, in the early 2000s, because this team was absolutely terrible. The last time they actually won the Super Bowl in 92, I was barely out of Huggies, okay? Only out of Huggies for a few years, all right? I knew how to use the toilet, but not for that long, okay? We're 33 years beyond that. Of course, we've all used the toilet several times since that moment, but the one thing we can say in all those years is the team that we knew as this franchise were playing like they belonged in the toilet, because they were absolutely terrible. It took 19 years to get your first playoff win in that time. In 2006 was that time that you got that playoff win when you had Mark Brunell and you had the man known as Joe Gibbs coaching your team. I used to call him the Gibbous, because he would walk in there as the Gibbous and dominate you with his mind in the 80s and early 90s. But in the 2000s, the Gibbous was not the same, and the game of football that we knew had changed so much since that time that the Gibbous was the Gibbous. And then you have a team with Sean Taylor and that defense that is absolutely electric. Now, this defense is not what that defense was. This offense is not what it was in 2012 during that remarkable rookie year by Robert Griffin III. It's better. It's absolutely better, because you have a quarterback that can not only run in situations now known as the RPO, the run pass option plays. You not only have a quarterback that has the ability to do that, but he has the ability to throw accurately. And he just steps up in there as him. Jaden Daniels is him. And he is somebody that you need to be scared of. There's a video that I sent around yesterday. Now, I can't send it here because I wasn't able to download it, but it's basically the movie Home Alone. And you have the wet bandits that show up, okay? You have the Lions who are there, who walk out the house, and then you have the wet bandits that show up, and it's JD. And Kevin runs away because he is scared of JD. And that is exactly what it looked like what happened in Detroit. My man Hawk, I gotta give a shout to him. I was taking a lot of hatred over this past week. It was playful hatred. I mean, people talking smack with sports, but basically said one of these days, because we had 4 straight days, actually 5, because I went into work Friday night. So we had 5 straight days before the game of talking smack between one another of our teams. You have the Lions and you have my team, formerly known as the Redskins. And in this game, I was predicting that they were going to win 35-31. And if you watch Total Football Talk Extra, the season finale this past Friday, I even said it there. I gave you a score. I said they were going to win 35-31. I was close. The Lions did score 31 points, but the Commanders just absolutely mollywopped them and scored an additional 10 points on top of what I predicted. I did not predict 2 touchdowns. Hawk was telling me they were going to beat our breaks and basically win 48-12 or some outlandish number like that. So there's no way that you're going to hold that offense to only 12 points. You might score 48, we might score 35 or something, and I could see that potentially happen and if things slip out of our way, but it didn't go that way. And I didn't have as much faith as I should have when I sat here right before week 1 on Commander's Gridiron Report and on this show right here when Cole and I were talking about the upcoming season. And I said this team could go 9-8, and I just didn't feel like they were going to go better than that. And Cole agreed and said that was a pretty good prediction considering that they were 4-13 the year previously. And a lot of people would have probably said I was giving them a little bit too much credit at that point, that they were going to go 9-8 at that point after going 4-13 the previous year. Having not seen Dan Quinn as a head coach in some time, having not seen Cliff Kingsbury in the NFL in a positive light in quite some time. And look at what this team did. Look at what they were able to maximize as far as the usefulness out of De'Ami Brown this year when not enough coaches were giving him credit since being drafted not too long ago. And coming here and being a solid number 2 receiver this year for McLaurin and doing it quietly until being noticed right at the end of the season. All right. So looking at what he was able to do for this team, look at how much not only the culture of changing the GM and bringing in a new head coach, offensive and defensive coordinator, and changing the entire structure of your coaching staff, and then drafting who you believe is your future at quarterback, your leader that for the next 10 to 15 years, as long as he stays with this franchise and is happy, which what they're building over there doesn't look like he's going to want to go over there anywhere anytime soon. As a Commanders fan, you got to know that as long as everybody stays healthy, including our quarterback, within the next 10 to 12 years, you're going to see some decent success. You can't predict anything like what we've seen in New England over those years or in Kansas City. That's too far out there to really predict. But I can at least tell you this, whether it's this year or next year, it's happening very soon where you don't be surprised to see your team in the Super Bowl. Nobody, including myself, thought it was going to happen at least to where you're 1 game away this year. I would, if I would have sat here before week 1, if Cole, any of our colleagues out here would have sat here and said that we're going to be seeing the Washington Commanders in the NFC Championship game 1 game away from the Super Bowl, you would have wanted to see results of a drug test by the next day within 24 hours, okay? And I wouldn't have doubted, I wouldn't have blamed you if you wanted to say that. But what I will say is this. Being on the other side of it, being a fan of this team since, being born, it was pretty much a birthright at that point, being put in those clothes, being a part of watching a team, not as much of a downfall as what the Lions have had or the Browns or several other teams, but at least a team that was known for a good decade or so for being dominant and winning 3 Super Bowls within a time period that I was alive for 2 of them, but it happened within my first 5 years on this planet. And of course, without watching NFL films or having the ability of watching things in the past, I wouldn't know what you were talking about today if you were talking about those Super Bowls that were played back then. That's the only way I've seen it and have memories of it is because of watching the replay. To be at this point, to see this franchise after 33 years have a chance, and we'll talk more about predictions here in a little bit, but to have a chance to win a Super Bowl at this point is a huge win. Myself going through things personally, I didn't potentially it might not even be alive today, and to be here at this point and say that I saw this happen to where my team made it to the Final Four in the same year that a custom championship was made for me, to have the logo that represents the colors of this team and what runs through my veins be part of this, I'd say it's a huge win. Going to the game, seeing the Hail Mary game and being part of watching this actual team that made it this far, seeing that team pull off that miracle on the 10-yard line and one of the best seat I've had as a fan of seeing anything absolutely huge or whatnot. Seeing that, being a part of that right there for this team, this 2024 team, and witnessing history in that moment, and to remember that not only that, you have a team that made it to the NFC Championship. If it makes it to the Super Bowl or not, or wins the Super Bowl, that's even better. But just to even get this far, to even get to where they were last week, I was happy. But those feelings and those emotions, let alone as a fan, don't compare to what I'm feeling today. As someone that covers the team, there's a lot of people out there that I've watched several videos over the last day and a half where people are reeling things back in about what they said about the Commanders throughout this year. And I can at least sit here with pride in my championship today and my man over to my side, Cole Johnson, right there on the bottom left-hand corner of the screen and in the background as well. He can hear me. He knows that we call things the right way throughout the past 20-some weeks. And whether we sat here and predicted this right or not, which we didn't fully predict this right or not, we called it down the middle because this show doesn't involve
Okay. Oh, Lord.
and it never will.
Oh, my gosh.
I don't know if that was 10 minutes, but I tried.
No, you did. But in that conversation that Drew and I had as well, Lions fan, he did say that you'll probably be seeing a lot of this probably in Commander's Gridiron Report. You know, I'll say this, for a team that is not known for defense, I think you all did.
Up.
Yeah, they did. I think they took the challenge, and they forced 5 turnovers on a team that basically made a living on taking care of the ball and being explosive. And you actually, it really looked like to me the Commanders was like, okay, yeah, you have an explosive offense. We'll show you that we can be just as explosive too. And you actually beat them at their own game, so to speak. And dare I say it, in his second ever playoff start, Jaden Daniels actually looked like he was the grizzled veteran, and Jared Goff looked like he was the one that had butterflies in his stomach. Yes, I know Goff threw for over 300 yards. Yes, he did throw for a touchdown. But five turnovers, he was responsible for 4 of them. And I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. Just from when the Commanders were on defense and the Lions were on offense, I was like, wow. They actually took what the Lions want to do, and they're like, you're not going to really do it because you got to play catch up. And I was really impressed with the defense more than I was with Daniels. That's not to say I wasn't impressed at all with him. I was hugely impressed with him. But I figured he was going to do what he did against the Lions defense. I did not think that the Commanders defense was going to really wreak havoc on Jared Goff the way they did. I did not.
I'm sorry, but I had to. I was going through looking at the comments. It is funny how all the NFC teams have been to the championship in the 2000s, but Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
You think you had Parcells? You had T.O. They had some pretty decent teams. And the Commies made it for the Cowboys.
Yeah. Yeah. And now the Cowboys. Wow, I didn't think I was going to go here, but I'm going to go there anyway. This has been yet another Beating a Dead Horse presentation. Now they own the longest stretch between the last time they went to a conference championship game and now. It's 30 years and counting, Cowboys fan. And now you get to see probably one of the worst sights for you.
Two rival teams,
Eagles and the Commanders, go in the NFC Championship game for the right for one of them to represent your conference in the Super Bowl. This season could not get any worse for Cowboys fan. And I know for Eagles fan, that makes it even better for them. And I definitely know for Commanders fan, I don't even have to ask Drew this. I know that is definitely something that's wonderful for them too. Because as much smack as Commanders and Eagles fan talk, because I've heard it. I'm not even talking about with the people I know. I've seen it and have been around it with people that are not affiliated with what we do. with the Smack the Commanders fan and Eagles fan talk. They will combine and say, hey, at least we're not the Cowboys. And they get the chance to watch two of their three biggest rivals go at it Sunday at 3 p.m. Oh my gosh. But yeah.
We could potentially be saying this for another 10 years to where year 40, Cowboys are still.
I love this. Nightmare for the AFT. And for those who don't know what AFT means, A is Arlington, F is football, and T means team. And for those who also don't know, the Cowboys play in Arlington, Texas. They don't play in Dallas. They don't play in Fort Worth. They play in Arlington.
I think they should change their name to the Arlington Desperados because that's exactly what they play like.
Oh, gosh.
Desperado.
Shout out to you, Eagles. And with 5 rolling on the floor, laughing emojis, crying emojis, I should say, Dante says, I just realized that Cole, the only thing that would be better is if the Super Bowl was at Dallas. Well, you never know.
With one of the NFC East teams making it, yeah, that would be great.
Regardless
of which one made it, yeah, that's still we're at least guaranteed that if it was in Dallas, that would be great.
Giants, Eagles, or Commanders. It doesn't matter. Any of the three. Don't matter.
We are not going to see the Giants there anytime soon.
Unfortunately, and I hate to say that, Wise, but yes, I agree, and I think he would agree with me. I think it will be a long time for us to see them there. But yeah, the Lions. It is so heartbreaking. 15-2. And I know they wanted to get much further than here, and they took it on the chin.
We're seeing the unicorn situation with what's going on with the Commanders. This is pretty historic. Not many franchises have been able to do what they've done within a year and turn it around with new ownership.
Not like this.
And new management, new quarterback, and then a lot of the free agent pickups that they made between offense and defense. A lot of that's making as big of an impact as Jaden Daniels is to this team. So I don't think the Giants or the Cowboys, unfortunately, can do that because you'd have to start completely new slate, everything from the top ownership. And neither one of those franchises are going to be letting go. The Maras have been that franchise. What started it all with the Giants. Yeah. And Gerald's family they're not going anywhere. So we're seeing a unicorn situation within the NFC East because there's not going to be any new owners for those teams for a very long time.
Wow. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. The team took it on the chin. It looks like the city of Detroit took it on the chin even harder because I think they expected this to be, as you said earlier, I think not all Lions fans, but I think many Lions fans expected this to be a route. This was going to be basically a stepping stone, and they pretty much figured they were going to be playing the Eagles. It was like, okay, we'll take care of the Commanders, and then we'll rush out over the Eagles, and then we'll go to New Orleans, and we'll beat either the Bills or the Chiefs, and we'll hoist that trophy. I think that's what Lions fan really thought this year was going to end like. Unfortunately, no. Dante says, so are Lions fans trolling y'all like Minnesota and San Francisco fans did us? Dude.
No, I would say that for the most part, they're accepting. They're pissed off, but they're accepting of what's going on.
Yeah.
Like, and more so just upset. Like, how Dan Campbell reacted is very similar to just how they're feeling right now.
Right.
Their expectations were more. They had more
expectations
for it. Yeah, they had higher expectations for their team. Mm-hmm. And looking at this for what it is, you expect more out of a team that's built like that, but the Commanders are just that sleeping giant that nobody expected. Yeah. Nobody expected this team to do this, not including ourselves, but we're getting a treat when we're watching this, and anybody who loves the game of football loves that high-scoring second quarter that we saw in that past
42 combined points scored in that second quarter. 42. The most ever in playoff history. There's never been a quarter that you've had that many points scored in a quarter. Yes, even the remarkable touchdown pass with Doug Williams of Washington in the Super Bowl. It surpassed that.
Mm-hmm.
It surpassed that.
And I got to give cool props because he called it. Getting second in the division and making the playoffs. A lot of people call that. I called them winning the first round against Tampa Bay, and I jokingly said what I said when I clipped the button earlier. and I predicted that win. We still haven't gotten to the 2-minute drill, but luckily we don't have 17 games to go through this week. We only got two, so it won't take us that long, and we still have the game of the week, but we still have time. But looking at this for what it is, for them to go second and make the playoffs and get not one but 2 playoff victories, I was happy with what they did throughout last week, and I'm happy what they did throughout this week. But if the train stops here, regardless of what we predict here in a little bit or how it goes, I'm just happy for it to get to this point after seeing a pretty bad franchise for quite some time. And I think regardless, we're going to be in for a good game this Sunday.
And not only that, but in the wild card round, you beat the NFC South champs. Saturday, you beat the NFC North champs. You get the opportunity to beat the NFC East champs. So you summarily beat the number 3 seed, then the number 1 seed. Now you face off against the number 2 seed. So if the Commanders were to go to the Super Bowl, you have knocked off the top 3 seeds in the playoff round just to get there. Unheard of. Oh, back to you, Dante. So Lions fan in general, it's not like that, but I have come across some new school Lions fans where they felt as though this season when things were happening, they were rubbing in. For example, I know a dude who he's a Lions fan. He travels to see Lions games, and I remember when he went to Houston to see the Texans on Sunday night. He would show the hotel, then he would show the place where he would eat, to get ready for the game if it was Sunday night. Then he would show himself at the seat and parade the camera around, and he would be just talking junk all throughout the video. And then he would, of course, at the end, if the Lions would win, he would say, "We conquered another town. Look at this. We conquered another town." Those new school Lions fans were ones that really were getting on my nerves. That's why I was sort of happy when the Commanders beat the Lions, and I went to him. I went right to him. It's like he put a social media post that said, "Out for lunch. Don't talk to me about Lion stuff." That made me smile. But Lions fans in particular, because I got another part who lives in Detroit and is a Lions fan. Nah, he doesn't talk junk. He's more along the lines of, "Man, I expected more of this team." And basically he also reflected what Dan Campbell did, just heartbroken and crestfallen because they expected more out of the team, and it was unfortunate. But 15-2, you still had a really good season. You had a record season, unfortunately, just ended in a bad way to what looks like to be a Haley's Comet type of phenomena in the Washington Commanders. Ooh, wow. And the Commanders will be going to South Philly for the NFC Championship game. Wow. Now for the game of the week. And I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to actually have Drew parade the belt longer than he did, but
we got the closing, but we got the post game. We'll be all right.
That's true. You've got a point there. The battle of the MVPs. Peas.
Hey, one thing.
Shoot.
To correct Dante from earlier, the voting was in like 7 or 8 days ago. So regardless of how this game went, it wouldn't have mattered.
Oh, talking about an MVP voting?
Yeah.
Oh, no. Yeah, this is for those who don't know, MVP, regular season award. So it didn't matter who did what in this game. And yes, some clown actually said, "Yeah, this game is proof that Josh Allen won it." And I'm like, no, it's not. There's no bearing on the award. But the battle of the MVPs, we'll find out the week before the Super Bowl. The Ravens and the Bills. The Ravens go to Western New York, and this actually was a really entertaining game. The Ravens jumped out to a 7-0 lead. The Bills basically stormed back. They rode the wave of a Lamar Jackson fumble to go up 14-7, and then they went to halftime up 21-10. When the Ravens remembered, oh yeah, we got Derrick Henry, and they just dominated the third quarter. So they got it within 2, but then they were down 8 with about 3 minutes to go, and Lamar Jackson led a massive drive down the field to get them within 2. And then he threw a beautiful pass into the waiting hands of Mark Andrews, and he dropped it for the 2-point conversion. Final score, the Bills 27, the Ravens 25. Josh Allen, a Jalen Hurts type of game, except he did not have as many yards on the ground. 16 of 22, 127 yards. Notice no touchdown passes. 10 carries, 20 yards. Yes, that is correct. 10 carries, 20 yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns. James Cook, he had 17 carries and 67 yards. He also had 3 receptions for 15. The Bills' offense, buoyed by Cook and many other runners, they chopped up 147 yards on the ground. Now, Lamar Jackson for the Ravens, he was 18 to 25, 254 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a Taylor Rapp interception, which, fortunately for the Ravens, it did not count in points because the Bills punted the ball back to the Ravens. 6 carries, 39 yards, and unfortunately for Lamar, that led to a touchdown for the Bills. Derrick Henry, 16 carries, 84 yards, and a touchdown. Not enough touches. Straight up. Not enough touches at all. But the Ravens offense, with 84 yards from Henry and 39 more from Jackson, a few more also for Justice Hill. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was 50 or 60. But they chewed up 176 yards on the ground themselves. Your thoughts on this game? Because I love the ebb and flow of it, because it seemed as if all 4 sides, both the Ravens defense and offense, both the Bills offense and defense, took turns dominating this game. That's what it looked like to me.
Yeah, and their Ravens defense didn't dominate enough, and I agree with you in the fact that Derrick Henry he needed to have more than 20 touches in this game, at least like 22 to 23. He's about like 6 to 7 touches short of saying a superb amount of touches in the game.
Agreed.
For him to get 84 yards on 16 carries is still great for what he did, but it wasn't enough production. They didn't have enough help over there. Their defense, they had some decent stops with what was going on with the weather, but at the same time, they still gave up 27 points. And literally, Mark Andrews dropped the ball. And my question with that is, he also ran the ball twice for a total of 3 yards. Why do they have Mark Andrews running the ball when those 2 carries should have gone to Derrick Henry? You took 2 carries away from Derrick Henry and you gave it to Mark Andrews. They did a decent job with not putting the ball in Lamar Jackson's hands as far as running, because he only ran 6 times for 39 yards, which is good. But at the same time, my big question mark is, the 2 rushes that you gave to Mark Andrews, what are you thinking over there, John Harbaugh, with that? And I anticipate one of us to go off on him later on in this program. But right now, thinking of that with the moves that they made there, Justin Tucker still had 2 kicks in the game and was perfect. So you can't really blame him for this game at all. It's the fact that Lamar Jackson's turnover made a difference as far as they should have won this game pretty decisively against the Buffalo Bills. When you look at that along with
that.
Yes, thank you. That interception, along with, we were just talking about how another game earlier, the penalties cost them. They had more penalties in this game than the Bills. The Bills did a pretty good job by only having 1 penalty in this game that cost them 10 yards. The Ravens had 5 that cost them 43 and also gave up 2 sacks. When you look at teams that were successful this past weekend with a mobile quarterback, even though the weather was much better because they were playing indoors, the Commanders and their mobile quarterback didn't give up any sacks. And when you're giving up multiple sacks on your offensive line, it's going to affect how your quarterback utilizes the game. So I'm concerned about that. Did pretty good on 4th down conversions as well as 3rd downs, and even won the battle of 1st downs in comparison to the Bills. But the Bills controlled the clock in this game. They also had better production consistently out of their quarterback because Josh Allen did not turn the ball over. And even though when we're comparing the quarterbacks of the weekend, and we were talking about how earlier Jalen Hurts was the quarterback that was only second worst on the day as far as productivity and passing yards, and still found a way to win. The number one top quarterback that had the
Josh
least
Allen.
production,
By far.
Josh Allen with 127 passing yards, still found a way to get it done with his legs because he still carried the ball for 10 carries. Only put up 20 yards, but still in the red zone got you 2 touchdowns. You got to give a lot of credit to Josh Allen for what he was able to do with his legs in this game. It's been the story of the year. It's been the story of his career. For what he's done with the Bills and in college. James Cook as well. I mean, this Bills offense, like you have here in the slate, 147 rushing yards. Not as good as the Ravens, but they were smarter with those running attempts because they didn't turn the ball over with the interception like they did over there on the Ravens side. And you also have 2 fumbles on the side for the Ravens, which, again, that's where I said, even though they had nearly 30 less rushing yards, they were smarter because they had no fumbles in this time in this game. So when you can go an entire game and not turn the ball over like you had over there in Washington, seems destined to potentially 33 years later that these 2 teams could face off in the Super Bowl. And we'll talk more about that here in the 2-minute drill.
I think you mentioned 2 keys. Not necessarily the interception that Lamar Jackson threw, which of course you don't really want him to turn the ball over at all. But the fumble, that was key. And the fourth quarter fumble from Mark Andrews, that to me was the deal breaker, because the Ravens were on their way to scoring anything, 3, 6, whatever. Because when Andrews receives the ball, he's on the Bills side of the field. And he tries to make a football move. All of a sudden, Terrell Bernard does the Peanut Tillman and goes, poop, and the ball slips out of the grasp of Andrews. I was like, oh, man. And then that 2-point conversion. Woo, wow. Horrible. But you weren't the only one that said they felt as though the Ravens really controlled this game. I was watching ESPN, I think it was Get Up, and I heard Damian Woody, former Patriots and other teams, but mostly Patriots, offensive lineman, and now he's an analyst for ESPN. He actually, the first words out of his mouth when asked that question was, he said, the Ravens controlled this game. This was a game for the Ravens to lose, and they were the ones who should have won this game. But the interception that Jackson threw, the fumble that he made, and the Mark Andrews fumble. Versus, to me, and this is what I put as the gold star for the Bills. Josh Allen, 20 yards running, 127 yards passing. Now, I'm like, that's not impressive. And you'd probably say, well, that's not impressive. That sucks. I agree. So the Bills were up 24-19. 3rd down. Allen tries to run out the middle. He tried to basically do the same thing as he did 2 other drives where he completed with basically a quarterback sneak up the middle for a touchdown. The Ravens read it, and they stacked him up, and they turned him to face basically midfield. Allen, for a split second, was about to toss the ball back to James Cook. And if he did, more than likely, it probably would have been a fumble because it would have been knocked out of his hands and it would not have been pitched. At the last second before he actually did it, he corralled the ball, said, "No, we got 3. Let's stay with it," and just took the tackle. If this was maybe him even 1 year ago, guaranteed he would have tried that lateral. And this is when you have to look beyond the stats. That play right there, to me, even though, you could say the drop by Andrews or 2-point conversion was a play of the game, or his fumble. But I say that was the play of the game to me, because it could have gone all wrong for the Bills right there. And Allen was smart enough and savvy enough to say, nope, we already have a chip shot for 3. And if we go up 8, it's going to make things difficult for them to go down the field. But if I were to throw this errant lateral, The Ravens might be down 5, but they will be motivated with this fumble and a touchdown without even converting anything else. They'll take the lead. No, I'm going to take this ball. That to me was play of the game. And that to me speaks more volumes to me about Josh Allen versus Lamar Jackson than any MVP regular season award really does. Because the quarterback's most major duty is to protect that ball. Period. And when he did that, I was like, "Yeah, you're on the road. That's what you're supposed to do." I actually clapped when I saw that. I said, "That's exactly what you're supposed to do." But as far as the Ravens, they are a team when it comes to the playoffs of missed opportunity. And they also are a team of conservative strategy. I just don't get them sometimes. It upsets me that this is the most talented team they have had. Dare say, even the Super Bowl teams they've had, definitely 2000, they weren't loaded like this. At least offensively, they weren't. And in 2012, they weren't. This is probably the most loaded offense they've had. Because to me, all you needed to have is an elite quarterback and an elite running back. And they still cannot even get past the divisional round. When all they need to do is feed the beast at least 20 times. I would say 25 times. And normally when you feed him that many times, good things happen. I don't think they lost the game if they ran him that much. But there's proof that they've only won maybe one game when they did not. And I'm like, this is simple. This is simple strategy. There isn't a team built in the NFL that can stop Derrick Henry if you have him run the ball 25 times. There isn't one. Oh, yeah, there is one. I'm sorry. It happens to be the Baltimore Ravens because they stopped themselves. And it is upsetting to me when I see that. You have the formula. You have the formula to beat the Bills. You have the formula to beat the Chiefs. But no, you have the greatest formula to beat yourselves. And forget the 3 turnovers. Yeah, that's bad. But the strategy to me was worse. Because, yeah, you at first you're like, okay, yeah, we'll run the ball with Henry. You ran it with him, fine. But you have to understand, you played this team 3 months ago. On the first play of their first possession, Henry gashes you 70 yards for a touchdown. So I know the Bills off the bus was like, this dude is not going to gash us, not like he did when we played in Baltimore. So you knew the defensive front was going to be ready to stop him. You knew there was going to be 4 or 5 stacked maybe on the line, probably even 6 to say, no, you're not going to do it. But if you just kept wearing him down, he would actually get off some runs. And then what happens in the third quarter? He burst the run. Maybe not as far as 70 yards, but he got a run to where it's like, okay, they might get gassed. And they did not stick with that because where was he in the fourth quarter? And that is what frustrates me about the Ravens. And I'll go worse and more ham on them for that. Dante says, how do you get Derrick Henry and take a step back? Last year was an AFC championship trip at home. This year, divisional round on the road. Yeah. Cool says, Ravens are undefeated when Henry gets over 90 yards this season. He didn't get it and they lost.
Yes.
Even yard
Very
total,
good
too.
stat line.
Yes, even yard total. Because to me, I can look at yard total. I look at carries.
We said that last week.
Mm-hmm.
We said that last week. We said he's got to get between 90 and 100 yards. If not, they're not winning this game. And look what happened.
Yeah. And they were on the doorstep to winning the game. He has 84 yards. And they go out. They bow out. Hawk TV, what's up, man? It's good to see you, man. It is good to see you. Glad that you're here, my brother. Dante says,
here, Hawk.
Yeah, man. He says, Dante says, look, I don't know why they keep running the ball. They didn't keep running the ball because Hill was going off. Look, yeah. I was about to say, not just Henry. Hill was getting some yards. So I'm like, how in the world did you go away from that and you're not running Lamar Jackson to the ground and you wanted to throw the ball so much? I mean, look, 25 throws, that's decent. But the fact that you had and I look at that third quarter, the fact that you had that control, the defense was on point. They were not allowing the Bills to do jack, and then the offense was mashing them with runs. I'm like, dog, you actually had the momentum. You just should have kept running. I didn't get that either. I still get annoyed because to me, the Ravens strategized themselves out the playoffs. But that does not mean the Bills were not good. They were the better team, slightly. And I say slightly because the offense did not turn the ball over and the defense forced 3. So because of that, that's a slight to me that the Bills were better. But the Ravens, you gave us a good year and you gave us a good game. In fact, you gave us the best game of this week. Unfortunately, you earned a trip back to Baltimore where you have to say, this was a season which could have been. Oh, well. That's it for opening drive.
All right, let's go. We got trips, right? At 42, 989 on 2. Ready? Break.
Oh, the fun's not over. Where my dogs at? It is time to award the grand champ for the divisional round of the 2024 season. And for Drew's pick, the floor is yours.
With that pick, I've been thinking about this, Cole. I've been thinking about this for quite some time, and I'm going to have to go with my guy, Jaden Daniels. I mean, who else is I going to go with on this weekend? Of course, I could have gone with Saquon. I'd say that'd be an honorable mention for me. 200-plus rushing yards. He deserves to be acknowledged as a grand champ of the week, but I haven't really picked JD this year. I've kept him off of this list for the most part. I think I've had him as an honorable mention. And I've talked about him, of course, on the Commander's Gridiron Report. But for this game, what he did as a rookie quarterback in Detroit, a loud place, historically loud place.
Very.
All the hype that was on the Lions goes in there. 22 of 31 for 299 passing yards and 2 passing touchdowns. Did not take a sack at all during the game. No turnovers, no fumbles, no interceptions, and also included 16 rushes for 51 yards. Were the numbers stellar on the ground? No, but the fact that he established a run with his other running backs and they pulled their weight too. And he was making changes at the line, helping the offensive line. You can even hear them in the mic'd up spots where they were thanking JD at certain points throughout this year for what he's meant as the quarterback of this offense, not only throughout this year, but in this game. The Commanders won because of number 5 being there at quarterback. I got 5 on it, and I got it right here and now for the grand champ of the week. That is my pick. Good old JD.
He got 5 on it. Oh, good. I'm glad you do. And look, when your rookie quarterback in his second ever NFL playoff start, and both of them on the road. In the second one, he gets 350 total yards. Can't complain. Can't complain about that choice. Can't at all. Good one. And I don't consider that one a homer either.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now, I have an honorable mention. Look, what Saquon Barkley did, 26 carries for 205 yards and a couple touchdowns. That has to be noticed, mentioned. He basically was the reason why the Eagles are where they are now, battling for going to the Super Bowl for the second time in 3 years. And basically, he is the reason why the Eagles have even gotten to this point, gaining over 2,000 yards and not needing to have the Eagles throw the ball all over the place. But I'm not going to give it to him. I have to be unbiased here. And the reason why I'm going in this direction, it sort of hurts my heart simply because the Texans, to me, outplayed the Chiefs. Unfortunately, they did not take care of some moments. And this gentleman stepped up to the plate, especially in the second half. George Karlaftis. I mean, I would hear his name, and it was sick. as a fan, it got more sickening and more sickening and more sickening because it was like he was around either the ball or Stroud all the second half long. 4 solo tackles, 3 tackles for losses, 4 quarterback hits, and 3 sacks, 3 of the 8 that the Chiefs amassed. I mean, to me, I look at this game, and to me, number 56 of the Chiefs, he basically is a microcosm of how the Texans season went and how the Texans season ended. As good as they were, there was just a presence that was better and more imposing. And unfortunately, it was him. And look, 3 sacks, that's remarkable in the playoffs. And so I just have to give credit where it's due. George, good job, my brother. You more than anybody earned your team a trip to the AFC Championship game.
They did their job once again.
Yeah.
7 straight times.
7
the Chiefs
in a row. Yeah.
Are now in the AFC Championship game. And, you know, George Karlaftis over the recent years has definitely made an impact there for that defense. We talked about Chris Jones. Karlaftis doesn't get enough flowers. And it just goes to show how much, pride you have in the sport of football and not just a homer for your team. You know, if the Texans would have won and you had one of them as your choice for grand champ of the week, I wouldn't have been mad because looking at what the stats they put up on that day. Yeah. But for you to sit here today and it just goes to show you're a big man, Cole. I'm proud of you for doing that. And I would have done the same thing had the Commanders lost in this past week. But, man, Karlaftis, not a bad choice. 3 sacks. He was that dude for the defense on that day.
Right. So, yeah, if he did this against any other team, I probably would have felt the same way. It's just, I was like, man, he's too big of a disruptor. But I give him props, and I give Jaden Daniels props. He earned that big dog award too. He did, because second ever playoff game, he gets 350 total yards. Woo! Dude's a stud, man. Wow. Total football talk. Time for the 2-minute drill. And before we do, we'll get a little bit to the tribe. Let me see. Sick. He says, look, clearly the Ravens got in their own way when it came to crucial games. When it comes to crucial games, yeah. I'll touch on that a little bit later. Dante says, so as much as Tomlin gets called out, John, does he get criticized? I'm glad you mentioned that, but I'm not going to touch that now. He also says, yeah, which season was more disappointing? The Cowboys, the Lions, or the Ravens? Personally, I'd have to say the Lions.
For the hype? Yeah, I mean, the fact that they won 15 games. We saw what we saw for the very last game of the season is that win decided who was going to go. Had the Vikings had the number 1 seed, would we have seen a win out of them from this past weekend when they played the Commanders? Is what they would have been the ones with the bye week. Detroit needed it more because they were banged up the most.
Yeah, they needed it by more.
And I feel like with what we saw out of them throughout this year, based on the hype from what we saw for the offseason, for the regular season, Detroit lived up to the hype. They did their job even with having 18 players on the injured list and having that many people down.
Most of them on defense.
Yes, which still put up pretty decent numbers until about week 14, the last month of the season.
That's about right.
They were having a hard time in that last month of the season, but still found ways to win games because their offense was prolific.
Awesome.
Because after that 5-interception game against Houston, Goff started picking things up. And for the regular season, finished strong as a strong offense. But you finally run into a team that can match you when you make a mistake, and you have 5 total turnovers in that game between the 3 interceptions and the 2 fumbles in that game.
And that
That
same
is
team
what
loses 0.
exactly killed you as Detroit. So going back and looking at it for what it is, I'd say the biggest disappointment were the Detroit Lions, because you should have dominated in this past week's game, but you didn't, because you couldn't live up to the hype in the playoffs. Again, 33 years later.
What sucks to me about the Lions too is, they had the NFC Championship in the grasp, and Dan Campbell to me ruined that. So you get almost 12 months later, and they don't even get to the NFC Championship game. Yeah, I think the taste, even though you can say the same thing about the Ravens, I think the taste is a little more bitter.
Yeah.
For the Lions than it is for the Ravens. For the Ravens, to me, it's just you lost. I hate to say it this way, you lost in the same fashion, only for the exception of it looks like Lamar Jackson has learned from some of those past playoff mistakes. Outside of that, you lost the exact same way you have lost the previous years. So I don't see it to be disappointing. And with the Cowboys, I'm sorry. You go without a running back. You only think CeeDee Lamb only offensive option you have. You were disappointing before you even set foot on Cleveland's field for game number 1. Yeah. And I'm not saying that to talk trash. That's just the truth. Let me see here. Where are we? Yeah, there we go. No, that's not it. There we go. All right, now we get to into the minute drill. We break down the games that will be on display, and there's only going to be 2. That's right, only 2. And because my brother is a huge Commanders fan, I will do his game second. We'll touch on the AFC Championship first. So it will be the Bills. They're coming in at 13-4 and victories over the Broncos and the Ravens in the playoffs. And they face off against the Chiefs, 15-2, with a victory over the Texans. And before then, it was a bye. This is the 4th time in the last 5 years they have met in the playoffs. And it's the 2nd time they have met in the last 5 years in the AFC Championship game. CBS and Paramount Plus will have that. The kick will be at 6:30. All right. Any keys that you see in this game, and who you see will represent the AFC in the Super Bowl?
If Hollywood writes the script for this game, it's going to be the Kansas City Chiefs.
Well, yeah, Chiefs. Yeah.
No. You know what? Let me retract that. If Hollywood were to write the script for this game, it would be the Bills and the Commanders in the Super Bowl. And because
that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
33 years and where we're at this point, because so many people are tired of seeing the Kansas City Chiefs play in the Super Bowl. But at this point, my pick was, I was saying it all year long, was going to be Lions and Bills. And I've been saying those 2 teams were going to represent the Super Bowl. And now that the Lions have been knocked off, in the way that the Kansas City Chiefs won this past week with virtually no offense except for Travis Kelce with 117 receiving yards and the touchdowns, and what they were able to do with their defense, this team, just regardless of how productive or how lack thereof, finds ways to win. And I've got to go with the Kansas City Chiefs winning this game at home. I like at this point in their franchise, in their dynasty that they have built, because they are a dynasty at this point, whether we want to acknowledge it or not. They don't need a three-peat to be a dynasty. They've got 3 Super Bowls as a unit between their 3 main pieces: their head coach, their quarterback, and their star receiver, which just happens to be their tight end that they've kept throughout this whole time. They have won 3 out of 4 Super Bowl appearances.
And that makes them a dynasty right there. Right.
And that, again, and they did that within a 5-year stretch, if I believe.
Yeah, so it was like 4 Super Bowls in 5 years, yeah.
4 Super Bowls in 5 years and won 3 of them. To me, they are already at dynasty status when they won last year. Or pretty much you could argue when they won the 2 out of 3 before that. Okay?
Yeah.
So I would say this one right here just could potentially make them the greatest dynasty of them all if they were able to three-peat, because
Right.
nobody's done that.
No one's
The Patriots won 3 out of 4 when they won
Mhm.
in the early 2000s with their first 3, but
Right.
still, this is greater than that. So,
Mhm.
looking at it for what it is, with what Patrick Mahomes is able to do, no matter if they're banged up or they just have lack of talent around them, they have found ways to win games.
Yeah.
And I've got to go with the Chiefs in this one. I don't know about you as much.
Mm.
My heart wants to go with the
Mm.
Bills. I really want the Bills to
Mm.
win, and I think that they could. But if Kansas City, it could be cold, and we could see some snow. I mean, we can see some
Yeah,
treacherous
you see
weathers over there too.
snow or
And
ice.
even though the Bills did what they did in their home field and know how to play in tough weather, I
Right.
just feel like I can't go against Kansas City at this point, Cole, because every single time I have,
Mhm.
I've lost. So if I really want them to lose, I got to pick the Chiefs
Pick 'em.
now. So that way it goes against me this week. I'm going with the Kansas City
Gotta pick
Chiefs,
'em.
unfortunately, but I will not be disappointed if it goes the other way.
Same. I would not be disappointed if the Bills win. To me, I think the matchup for me, and people need to talk about put some respect on it, or put some spec on it, as you like to say. People need to say Steve Spagnuolo's name, because
Yes.
he is, to me, the greatest coordinator, defense or offense, in the last 25 years. The reason why I say that, look how he was with the Giants. He was chiefly responsible for those 2 rings they got there. And he comes aboard here, and the Chiefs win 3 more. This dude, I don't know how he does it. He comes up with game plans that just stymie offenses. I don't know how he does it. He continues to do it, and he calls brilliant games. He calls brilliant games. He throws blitzes when you least expect it. He, when in 3rd and long situations when you think he's going to probably rush with 5 or 6, he rushes you with 4, but he does an exotic 4 on you. Where you have different types of gaps that's hit. I mean, Spagnuolo is one remarkable defense coordinator, and I think I think with him, the matchup is, to me, between him and Joe Brady, the offense coordinator for the Bills. I think it's going to be a chess match du jour with them. Now, of course, I'm not sneezing on the other end of that. I mean, come on, Andy Reid, one of the best play callers in the history of the sport. So
Yes.
we're gonna see some chess matches too with the Chiefs offense and the Bills defense. But to me, I think the game is going to be won when the Bills have the ball, and the reason being, I actually think the Bills have the offense that is necessary that could continuously put the pressure on the Chiefs defense. Now, the issue is, or the question is after that, can they put enough pressure on the Chiefs defense to where they can have them on their heels all the time? Unfortunately, the answer to that question is no. And when you have that, and you have, to me, the best quarterback in the game today in Patrick Mahomes, only needing to do 2 things: not turn the ball over and make maybe a play or 2, and he's capable of doing that. Yeah, I see the Chiefs winning. And yes, last year, when the Chiefs and the Bills played, I went against Tide and said, okay, I think the Bills will beat the Chiefs. And the Chiefs said, well, yeah, this may be our first road playoff game in the Patrick Mahomes era, but we're still going to shove it in your face, and we're still going to beat the Bills. And they do it.
The reason why I say I wouldn't be surprised if the Bills won, because I mean, we look back at the contest, they'd faced each other earlier this year, and the Bills won that game.
They did.
And both of these quarterbacks played against one another. So looking at it for what it is, I can't be surprised if this happens, because back on November 17th, the Bills won at home 30-21. The difference in this is that you flip the scales, they're at Arrowhead this time.
Yeah,
So
they're
they
not-
get
they're not high. They're not marked.
you don't have a unicorn like JD who can just cut through a crowd with the crowd noise and do what he does. I think that this makes a difference in this game, unfortunately. Plus, with certain games and certain referee situations, that could be a factor too. So, you have to look at it for what it is, and you have to weigh in the factor of everything else. I think that even though the Bills won several weeks ago, they're going to take that L this weekend, and I want to be wrong. I really hope I'm wrong here, but I feel like it's just going to happen differently at Arrowhead.
If the Bills win this game, Josh Allen will have to severely outplay Patrick Mahomes. I'm not even saying outplay him the way C.J. Stroud outplayed him, because C.J. Stroud outplayed Patrick Mahomes, but it wasn't a severe outplaying. Like, when I mean severe outplaying, I mean Mahomes throws for what he throws, but Stroud, instead of a 250, he throws for over 300 yards, and he throws for 2 or 3 touchdowns.
And in that game
That's
against
not
them,
mm-hmm.
yeah, what they can't do like they did in this past game, which is why they lost, is they had lackluster production from their receivers. Where outside of Xavier Worthy, who had 4 receptions for 61 yards and a touchdown, everybody else had 3 or less receptions. DeAndre Hopkins being that one, 3 for 29, and it only got worse with the other receivers after that. Travis Kelce only had 2 catches for 8 yards. I feel like he's more integrated within the offense more at this point, to where they should do a better job in production in this game.
And he'll be more
that's
involved.
why that, along with being at home and having that momentum, they're going to find a way to win this game, because it's just, if anything happens storybook-wise, the Chiefs are going to have to at least get to the Super Bowl before they lose and not make the three-peat. I just feel like we're talking about destiny with what I said earlier with the Commanders. This could potentially be it, except for I might not be getting the Bills and the Commanders right, but it might be Chiefs and Commanders. The battle of who woke America's name they didn't take away.
Oh, Lord.
Commanders and Chiefs.
Commanders and Chiefs. Goodness gracious. Okay. Yeah.
Good.
I like I said, I see it as that's what's going to have to happen. I think Josh Allen has to severely outplay Patrick Mahomes in order for the Bills to even have a chance to get one in their head, because Mahomes does not have to play a perfect game to win. And I don't think he has to play a perfect game to win against the Bills. Now, does he have to turn the ball over? Does he not have to turn the ball over? That would help. And I think if he does turn the ball over multiple times, that also will help the Bills. But nah, the conference is too comfortable. Mahomes only lost one AFC Championship game at home. I just don't see. I see the Bills playing to par with the Chiefs. I don't see them playing above them, and that's what they have to do. And if all things are equal, like if they were on a neutral field, that'd be a really difficult decision to make. But all things aren't equal. They're playing Arrowhead. This is the Chiefs' game to lose, but it's going to be one entertaining game. That much is certain. You know, I'm not saying this is going to be a rout. I'm not going to say this is going to be like double digits, but I'm saying that, yeah, this game is going to be competitive and it's going to be close, but the Chiefs, they're going to be the ones that's going to get the dub, and we're going to see them again for the 5th Super Bowl in 6 years, and going for the three-peat of winning 3 in a row. Yeah, I believe that's what we're going to see.
Hey, who's giving them the business?
And now the game that my brother is salivating over, and Dante and Cool are salivating over, because they represent the opposite end. The Washington Commanders at 12-5. They meet their arch rival, well, not arch rival, but divisional rival, Eagles at 14-3. They ruled the top of the NFC East. They now will square off for a 3rd time. This time it is for the George Halas Trophy. Fox will carry that game. The opening kickoff at South Philadelphia will be at 3 p.m. What are the keys to this game, sir, and who do you see winning it?
Now, the keys to the game is who runs the ball better than who controls the clock, and who doesn't turn the ball over. Because the turnovers are going to be key. And, you know, both teams have a good chance of winning this game. And the Eagles tip the scales a little bit more than the Commanders because of their experience over the last few years, and especially over the last decade, with them making it to multiple Super Bowls and winning one of them. I mean, I have to give the respect and give the credit where it's due. I can't sit here and say, oh, as a homer, and they're going on in there and they win the game. No, I'm not going to do all that because that would discredit everything I've ever said on all the other shows I've ever done in the past and all the other media work I've ever done to this point. So I have to give it to where the credit's due and be honest about this. And the Eagles are where they're at this year because of Saquon Barkley. It's not because of the coaching, because the coaching had cost them in multiple spots throughout the years. And Nick Pissy Pants, as I've called him,
Sirianni pissed me off, and I'm not an Eagles fan.
Yes, and he just as somebody who's watching football and analyzing it, I'm not even looking at the color of the uniforms or the rivalry of I'm looking at just the coaching. I can't stand looking at him and how he calls games. It just his attitude towards the people and the fans, and he's not professional when it comes to that. And he's just
an attitude toward his own players and his coaching staff.
Yes, and I just don't like it. So looking at it for what it is, that's why I have the sour taste for him in this moment. At this point, with this team, the Commanders just have a really good chance, and it's the same thing I said as last week. If you get down to 2 minutes. You get down to 2 minutes, and they're down by a possession, and the ball's in JD's hands. He's going to win the game,
he's
going to win. Or yes, I mean, I'm just saying, gotta give a little bit of fluff on it. You got 2 minutes and a timeout, or even no timeout. He still finds a way to get it done. This kid is smart. He looks like a 10-year veteran. Yeah. Whatever this VR headset thing that they're talking about that he's been using since his time in college, it absolutely works because he is putting in. You could tell that he has put in the work. No sacks in this past game. I don't care what Jalen Carter does. You don't have Nakobe Dean. That's a problem in this game, too. You don't have Nakobe Dean over there for the Philadelphia Eagles. He's hurt. He's one of the biggest pieces you have that puts pressure on the quarterback. And we've seen that throughout the first game when you dominated the Commanders earlier in the year when you won with Jalen Hurts.
He's the most solid piece of pressure. Yeah. Nakobe Dean.
Y'all saw him again in the second game, when they played and the Commanders barely won and had to come back at the end. And, of course, you didn't have Jalen Hurts. You had Kenny Pickett in there. But what offset that made the game close was your defense. And now your defense is banged up, kind of like what happened with Detroit. So you take away the fact of of course, you don't have 18 people that are down like Detroit did.
Right.
But you take away all that. You take away all of that and the fact that Jalen Hurts has been very inconsistent at certain points. Yeah, he had a pretty decent game in this past one where he had to step up with his legs, but he's been inconsistent because he's been hurt. So, and look at how the first game went. So when we go back to it, I think the Commanders have a really good chance, and this is not me being a homer, but somehow, some way, I see the Eagles finding a way to win this game because there's been a lot of hype on if they were going to rewrite it, it would be Kansas City and Philadelphia in the Super Bowl because of what happened with the whole Bradbury INT call, with the whole pass interference, the pass interference call in the Super Bowl a couple years ago. When I've picked against the Commanders, they've seemed to find a way to win. So just like I did with the other one, when I picked the Chiefs to win and hoped that the Bills would, I'm going to pick the Eagles to win this game, and I'm probably going to regret this. And the Commanders are going to find a way to win it because I just have a feeling that the Commanders are going to go to the Super Bowl and lose. To me, that's what my gut feeling's telling me, and as me as a fan. But for what I've seen out of Saquon this year and what the Eagles have found a way to do with a new center who replaced Kelsey, and they've gotten this far and they've dominated the running game like they have, I just feel like I want the Commanders to not have too much success too soon to hurt them later on down the road. Eagles win this game by less than a touchdown.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a competitive game. I think it's going to be close. And it's going to be close for the understanding that you're dealing with teams that know each other. And only when that happens, there's certain things that you could do with certain teams that you can't with your divisional rivals. So I think you'll have that. You'll also in the game, you'll have some tempers that will flare. You normally have that happens more often than non-divisional rivals, or in the case of the Chiefs and Bills, teams that don't keep seeing each other every January. because it's just a different type of flavor when it comes to going against a divisional rival. But to me, the key for the Commanders is they have to force Jalen Hurts to be a pocket passer. I'm not saying that he can't beat them. I'm not saying he's horrible as a pocket passer. I'm saying that the Commanders' chances to beat the Eagles would be far better if you make Jalen Hurts beat you in the pocket. That means you can't have him run. That means that you have to corral him. Somehow you have to make him a pocket passer. What I see being a problem, and look, Jaden Daniels is going to do his thing. Terry McLaurin, he's going to have one of those catches where it's like, how does that dude keep getting open? I mean, I ask that almost every game. It's like, how does this dude keep getting open? Dang. Hopefully, De'Ami Brown can continue in his ascension to actually be a good, healthy part of the Commanders offense. And those said their running back by committee is working well. I'm loving that you got Robinson that gets the tough yards and Eckler that gets the scat back yards on the ground. I sort of like what they're trying to do schematically, and I got to give Cliff Kingsbury credit. Never been a real huge fan of his, but this year he has done a really good job with that offense. To me, all of that is great, and they're going against a stalwart defensive squad, and Jalen Carter has stepped up huge. He stepped up huge this year, but I think he has stepped up huge in this playoff stretch. And I think the Eagles need him to be a huge difference maker, if for no other reason to make up for the loss of Nakobe Dean. Because I agree, Dean has been the most solid presence of pass rushing pressure for the Eagles all year. And so he's gone. Someone else has to fill that role. And seemingly, although Carter is a defensive interior lineman, he still could put that pressure on an offensive line. The key to me, and you said it, who can run the ball better? And here are stats that I think will tilt it in the Eagles' favor. When the Eagles played the Commanders in Philly, I think it was Barkley had 27 carries, 147 yards, 2 touchdowns.
Yep.
When they played them in Landover, I believe either he had 26 or 29 carries. I think it was 29. He had 29 carries for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns.
It has nearly 300 yards against us.
See, So you combine that, it's almost 300 yards.
Mm-hmm.
The Commanders seem to have an issue stopping Saquon. And I think, and I don't necessarily mean he has to go from 150 to 50. If so, that'd be great for the Commanders. But probably, 85, 90. Just try to find a way to where the Eagles is trying to actually have him get that one big burst, that one big run that he did have in Landover against them, where it's like, dang, he gashes for a huge one. If you can stop having him have one of those types of runs, the chances are greater. Unfortunately, I don't think the Commanders defense has it in them to do it. I think the Eagles offense is just a wee bit too physical for the Commanders defensive front to slow down. I won't contain. I won't say stop. But I think it's just a wee bit too strong to have that defensive front contain them. And I believe that is the reason why they have to go on to the Super Bowl. Now,
but they also got to control the clock, though, Cole. And that's one thing the Commanders have done really well. The Commanders have done a really great job at controlling the clock. And if Jalen Hurts turns the ball over, it's over. I mean, you cannot have turnovers against this team because the Commanders find ways to capitalize on turnovers and make you pay. And that's exactly what happened in this past game. So you have 1 to 2 turnovers. I believe it's it. But what's definitely going to affect this game is the rushing, like we both said, and if the quarterback is smart with the football, which we already know that based on the tape and what's gone on consistently, even though he's had a lot less tape than Hurts, Consistently
Daniels
right
have-
now, Jaden Daniels has been a whole lot better consistently with the football with not turning it over than Jalen Hurts has.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I agree. The game tilts on the running game and the quarterbacks. No question.
But
Who's going to be more
also,
effective and who can make the least mistakes of all of them. I agree with you there.
with what he's saying here, that's
Mhm.
Sam Cosmi, the right guard. Yes, he
Mhm.
tore his ACL in the past game, bent over backwards, and that was definitely a big blow to the offense. So yes, that could definitely make a difference. But the one thing is, JD's been good with his legs, been able to move around, and
Yeah.
even after that happened, still didn't take a sack in that game. And he
That's
faced,
amazing.
in my opinion, the toughest matchup he would have seen in this whole playoffs. That's why a lot of people are saying that if they can beat Detroit the way they did, and especially decisively like they did, the sky's the limit at this point.
Now,
And, I'm not even arguing at that, but I think they got a good chance of winning in Philly.
Now, am I saying that? Yeah, and am I saying that the Commanders have no chance of beating the Eagles? No, I'm not saying that at all. I think I have a great chance of beating them personally because I think they know them better than any other team right now in the league. Just from that alone, they stand a great chance of beating them. Plus, they have the confidence that they can't beat them. Although, yes, I agree, Dante, regular season. But still, you'll take any advantage you can. The last time these two teams played, Daniels throws, was it Crowder? Yeah. Daniels throws a TD pass to Crowder with 6 seconds to go in the game. to have them pull out with a 36-33 victory. Those things, yes, I know it's regular season, but those things do matter. But and thank you, yeah, Nolan Smith, another dog, another Georgia alum that went up to Philly on defense. Yeah, he has had a big impact too. Just that defensive interior of the Eagles. I'm like, shh. I was like, that was just a crime. I still want to shake Howie Rose and they say, how the heck did you manage this?
I just with the defenses that have tried and the fact that he has elevated himself each and every week, whether it's my Homer hat on or not, they've got their toughest challenge of the season at this point, just like the Detroit Lions did. You cannot contain JD. And JD is going to find a way to drop the people's elbow. You give him the ball 2 minutes or less. He is going to drop the people's elbow, and he is going to take this dub. And whether they lose the Super Bowl or not, which I feel like they're still going to lose it to the Chiefs. It's Commies and Chiefs in this upcoming Super Bowl. I've got to put my heart out there now and stick with it. I reversed my call earlier. I'm going with the Commies winning this game.
What a shock. I'm sorry. Oh, Lord. Dante, to give us food for thought, he said, now remember, in these 2 games that Daniels have played against the Eagles, he does have 3 picks against this defense of the Eagles. Remember the last 2 games. And definitely the balance of the Landover game, no hurts. Well, it's true. He also says, look, it really comes down to Kellen Moore. And for those who don't know, that's offense coordinator for the Eagles. He says, if he calls a great game, we win. If not, they take an L. To me, the game that Kellen Moore has to call is they got to have Hurts get key plays, but I don't think he has to go crazy in terms of maybe a play or 2 with his legs. It definitely not maybe 3 or 4 with his arm. But if you could do that in concert with Barkley getting that average of 150 yards, I don't think he'll get 150, maybe 120. If he could do that in concert with Saquon going off and finding ways to actually have him go off, then that would be a good game that Kellen Moore has called. But if he has to call a game where Hurts is on the run, like if the same thing were to happen to Hurts this coming Sunday as what happened this past Sunday, that's an L. That's an L. If the Commanders can sack Hurts 7 times, that's an L. That is a guaranteed bona fide L. I will say that. No matter how many yards Barkley runs for, that's an L. Because because that offensive line, the Eagles should not allow Hurts, and Hurts himself should not allow himself to get sacked that much. And not that much against a team that is explosive on offense, and you know they're explosive, and they've been explosive against you on offense. And that was, if I'm not mistaken, that was with Jacoby Dean the last time he played. And you don't have him now. So this is going to be an interesting game. It is. It is. My pick is still the Eagles because, to me, Kellen Moore has called a good game. Hurts has to not turn the ball over, and Barkley has to be a presence, and Sirianni has to get his big nose out of the affairs. Because I'm waiting for when he butts his nose into business that really doesn't concern him, and he gums up the works of the Eagles. I'm waiting for it. Because to me, that's the only thing that separates you all from being Super Bowl champs.
You can call a good play all you want to. You can call a good game all you want to. But it's how it's executed in the game is what makes the difference. And we saw this Commanders team execute 5 turnovers against the number 1 team in the NFL.
And they actually
this isn't the number 1 team in the NFL. This is the number 2 team for a reason, Cole.
Yeah.
The number 1 loser.
And the Lions, for the balance of the year, they actually did take care of the ball pretty well. So, to your point.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, there were talks about Jared Goff being up there in the MVP talks for several weeks throughout the year.
It was.
Until he threw the 5 interceptions.
5 interceptions game. Mm.
So, looking at this for what it is, I've got to. I'm not going to be surprised if the Commanders win. I'm still siding with you on the fact that the Eagles are more likely going to win this game. But if the Commanders put the pressure, if the Commanders put the pressure on Hurts like they did with Goff, it's over. And force him into turnovers. You have a turnover or 2, it's over. The Commanders are going to be the upset of the whole entire season, going to the Super Bowl. But regardless of who they play, I just feel like it's best for their future to lose the Super Bowl, or at least lose here, because then they have something to build upon, rather than have too much success too soon.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I'm afraid of, unless it's the beginning of something of what the Chiefs were trying to do.
Yeah, I was about to say, unless it's like what the Chiefs did 5 years ago. Yeah, that's true. Or then
it's a win-win. But that's a little bit far-fetched at this point for me to say that. But analyst side and what I've seen throughout the year, and especially what they can do in the running game, I have to tip the scales to the Eagles. But don't be surprised if the Commanders win.
Now, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. And I was slightly surprised that they actually beat the Lions. I wasn't like, oh, I didn't see this coming. It was more along the lines of, dang, they really outplayed them. They really outplayed the Lions. Dante, you raised a really good point. I'll scratch is in that sentence and will say needs to. And I say that because I really believe the Commanders' strategy is going to be limit as much of the carries as we can with Saquon, force Jalen Hurts to be a pocket passer, and A.J. Brown will need to go off. He will need to go off because that is what I think would need to happen if Hurts beats the Commanders passing. A.J. Brown has to be a huge part in that, no question. But it's going to be a great game. In fact, I think I'm looking forward more to that one than actually the Chiefs-Bills. Although I love the Chiefs-Bills, I'm looking forward to that one more. Well, that takes care of the 2-minute drill.
Total football talk.
Oh, but it is not over for us yet. It's time for us to award our snowflakes of the week. And Drew, who is yours?
Well, we learned from this past week who was playing like a rookie and who wasn't, because he got served there. And for my pick for the Snowflake of the Week, I am going with good old Jared Goff. He was 23 of 40 in completions out of attempts. Yeah, he had 313 passing yards, but only one passing touchdown in comparison to 3 interceptions. He also had 1 fumble in the game and 1 rushing attempt for 7 yards. Congratulations for that 1 rushing attempt, but you fumbled the football. And this, I have to say, if I can give an application or a certification or some type of piece of paper to you, I would give you one that says you are a certified dumpster pelican for your performance in this game, because this was a certified dumpster pelican performance there, Cole Johnson. Jared Goff absolutely gave the game away to the Commanders with his interceptions, with his turnovers in this game. I have to give it to good old Jared Goff for my Snowflake of the Week. Just look at how sad he looks. And would you just look at him? Ed Bassmaster with the psh out here with certified dumpster pelican performance of good old Jared Goff for my Snowflake of the Week pick out here in these streams.
Certified dumpster pelican performance. Wow. I can't disagree. I mean, you play a big game, you're at home, and you turn the ball over 4 times. Yeah, that sort of is sort of dumpster pelican-ish. I definitely can't dispute that. All right, before I go with my pick, I'm going to go with an honorable mention because Mr. Hill, you asked. No, not that one. You asked. Now, Tomlin gets a whole lot of criticism. Why doesn't John Harbaugh? Well, he's about to get some criticism here. John, the way you call games in the playoffs sucks. Why? Because you have a free agent you signed on the dotted line. And it was to help Lamar Jackson get over the hump and get into the Super Bowl. How can you do that when you don't have number 22's tongue wag? 16 carries, 84 yards. That's not enough for that man to bring home the bacon. You need to have him carry at least 20, I would say 25 times in the playoffs, because you got to assert that physicality. That's what got you to the dance. That was what was going to bring you further to the dance, and it was going to get you to the big dance. You saw all year long, this was how you had to offensively be in order to win games. And you get there, and you even have a game where you destroy and dismantle your biggest rival by running the ball. But what do you do against the Bills? You get cute. And in the second quarter, you get really cute, and you want to throw the ball to place. And then you realize after halftime, oh, yeah, our identity is running. Problem. You got to stop handicapping Lamar Jackson. It is you, sir, not him, that is prevailing in failure and preventing your wonderful elite quarterback from sniffing the Super Bowl, let alone the Vince Lombardi Trophy. But he is not my Snowflake of the Week. That honor goes not to Harbaugh, but to his faithful tight end and probably the security blanket of Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews. Now, he did have 5 receptions. He did have 61 yards. He actually had a couple of key receptions. One of them in the fourth quarter where it was for a first down, and it got him into the Bills' side of the field, got him in Bills' territory, past midfield. He had it corralled. He was about to he made his football move, and he was wanting to get away from the safety du jour, Terrell Bernard, but boop, a Peanut Tillman punch had the ball squirt out of his grasp, which ended up being the 3rd turnover of the game for the Ravens, and probably the most costly because of when it came. Yes, I know Lamar Jackson had 2 turnovers, one of them being a fumble that actually did lead to a Bills touchdown in the second quarter, and an INT in the first quarter that didn't lead to anything, led to a punt. But this was key because it stopped a touchdown drive possibly happening, and it allowed the Bills to put points on the board. But what sucked worse than that. Jackson put on the Superman cape, which I have issues with that. Threw a beautiful touchdown pass to Isaiah Likely, the other tight end of the Ravens, to get the score within 27-25. Then, with 90 seconds to go in the game, they decided to go for a 2-point conversion, which they should have. And Lamar Jackson rolls to the right. He sees it. Mark Andrews, with no defender near him, was ready to receive whatever pass Lamar was going to throw to him. And Lamar lays it to him. I mean, could not have thrown it any better. Didn't zip it to him, didn't lollipop it to him. He actually gave it a nice little toss to where it was simple. All Andrews had to do was corral the ball and fall back, and the game would have been tied at 27. And this has been one of the most reliable hands that the team has, right? In this case, wrong. Because it looked like dude had Crisco on his hands. And unfortunately, he's going to be thinking about that drop for the whole off season. And because of Mr. Andrews having Crisco on his hands, the Ravens go home early, and they go home one round sooner than they did last year. And now Lamar Jackson has to answer more questions as to, why did you not make it to the Super Bowl this year? Thank you, Mark. Oh, my goodness.
Thank you, Mark.
As long as it's one. That's great.
Well, before we get to the post game, your comments, sir.
I loved it. Thank you, Mark. That was absolutely great. In the Crisco on the hands, and I figured you would like that little twist I put on it. He literally dropped the ball.
Dropped the ball for the Ravens. He did, and that was
I
wanted. Yeah,
you have literally dropped the ball for the Ravens and certified dumpster Pelican performances. That was between the two. Mm-hmm. You know, they both qualified for certified dumpster Pelican performances, but for Snowflakes of the Week, I feel like we both had some great choices in this episode for episode 73 of Total Football Talk. And we even found a way to get Yo King up in here earlier and bring that into this episode, because there's going to be people out there that at some point, if this Commanders franchise plays like this for the next decade, there's going to be people that feel like they do about Yo King. And it's going to be Jaden Daniels will be the Yo King of football at some point.
But you'll like that.
I don't know how I'd feel about that if that happens in football, if he is the Yo King of football.
Oh, Lord. Well, I know you have a lot of thoughts for what you have seen over this past weekend. So normally, for those who are new to the show, this is the part of the show post game where we give our final thoughts as to the week that was, and probably with some thoughts to the week that's to come. So, Drew, the floor is yours. What are your thoughts?
I would say that I don't think that he's ever going to be like Yo King, because he's not as outspoken as Yo King is. I mean,
he's a whole lot more humble. Yeah.
Yeah, he's not going to sit out there and tell you that he is the greatest of all time and all this stuff, even if he does eventually become that. I mean, it's too soon for me to sit here and start talking all that stuff just 1 year in, because there's other people that have had one-hit wonder type years at some point in the past, whether they got as far as him or not, and not many have. So for Jaden Daniels to have the year that he has, and for me to be at this point on January 20th, 73rd episode, just coming off the divisional game, and talk about the fact that the Commanders have made the Final Four of the NFL, of the playoffs, is absolutely wild. For them to be one game away from the Super Bowl, win or lose, is absolutely wild when you think about how the past 30-plus years have been. The fact that it was 1991, which was the last time that the Commanders had gotten this far with the win over the Lions, except for they beat them in the NFC Championship game to go to the Super Bowl. And when you talk about the history that I read off to you earlier, It's not far-fetched to think that if Hollywood was writing the script, there's a good chance the Commanders and the Bills win this upcoming Sunday, or one of those two teams would win. And I just feel like we have a better chance seeing the Chiefs beat the Bills and make it towards another knocking on the door for a three-peat. And our upset could be the Commanders winning on the road because they've now done it 2 weeks in a row. They did it in favorable conditions because they played in Tampa Bay where the weather wasn't that bad, and they just did it in a dome. If it's snowing and doing what this nasty wintry weather has been doing on the East Coast, which we've been feeling it over here with the state that I'm in as well, we could see a nasty game like we just saw this past weekend. And of course, you have to tip the scales to the Eagles because they're the ones that play in it consistently. And the Commanders, even though they've played in some iffy types of scenarios this year in weather, they didn't play in weather that was as bad as what the Rams had to face this past week in Philly. So I would still, again, I'm agreeing with Cole in saying that the Eagles have a really good chance to win this game. And if they do, it's going to be one of those told you so moments. But I'm just sitting here telling you today, don't be surprised if JD shows up and does his thing in this game and shows up like he did, like the Wet Bandits, scare Kevin and Home Alone. Because it could happen. It really could. And they could win this game. And I wouldn't be surprised if it happens. But right here and now, on this day, to get this far, as a Commanders fan or somebody covering it or just somebody who loves football in general, if your team hasn't gotten this far, you're rooting for JD. I have to say this based on one of the comments that we got earlier in the show, that Detroit Lions fans are actually being pretty more accepting of this, and they're now rooting for us to beat the Eagles and go on to the Super Bowl and beat the Chiefs or whoever is the Bills or whoever, because if you beat them, that means you're the top dog in the playoffs at this point. You beat the number one team. So I feel like the Eagles should be the underdogs regardless if they're the number 2 seed at this point, because you're playing against the really hot team in the Commanders. And the Eagles have been winning games, but not in the way the Commanders have. The Commanders should not be the underdogs going into this game, which even though they are, this is why it's going to be reversed. And the Commanders are going to win the game, Cole Johnson. That's just my feeling, my gut feeling for the game. But I'm torn because I'm still going with the Eagles. I know I'm back and forth on this thing, but it's tough because it's really a 50-50 crapshoot at this point. Give it to whichever team the credit, because whoever wins this NFC Championship game, they really have a good chance at knocking off whoever wins the AFC.
Yeah.
But here and now, Chiefs and Commies, don't be surprised if it happens. That's all I got to say, because I can keep dancing around on this as much for the next hour, but I'm torn because you can't believe that they have made it this far, but they did.
Well, I'm proud of your Commanders. I mean, from 4-13 to an NFC Championship at worst, NFC Championship appearance. Yeah, I would say that's a huge 1-year turnaround. And yeah, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of your Commanders. They're doing the right things, and I'm loving what I'm seeing from them. I really am, as an outsider. It's funny. I was hearing what Drew just said. It made me harken me back to thinking of seeing the end of Juice, where I'll equate the Commanders Lions game to that, where the Commanders and the Lions are fighting on top of the balcony, and the Commanders, they're Quincy or Q, and the Lions they're Bishop, and Q gets a hold of Bishop and gets the better of Bishop. Bishop goes over the top and falls to his death, and then Q turns around, walks away from the crowd, and one of the bystanders says to Q, "I'm sorry, I'm saying this wrong." And one of the bystanders said to Q, quote, "Well, you got the juice now." Close quote. So I guess Lions fan is saying to Commanders, "Oh, you got the juice now." And even if they do lose to the Eagles, I think they do have the juice, simply because of not what we're seeing on the field, what we're seeing off of it. I'm actually impressed with the ownership group led by Josh Harris. I'm also impressed by the fact that he is unafraid to allow Magic Johnson to be a big part of the Commanders as a team. I love that. And
Star
it seems
power.
like, yeah, and it seems like it seems to have permeated with the whole team. So yeah, congratulations to the Commanders. Congratulations to them. It is great to talk about them in this light versus the light that we have talked about them in the previous 30 years before the Harris group and Magic Johnson group coming together and basically getting the swamp. You saw what I did there. Draining the swamp and actually infusing the franchise with good positive energy that I think we've been needing to see since Jack Kent Cook owned the team.
Yes.
So that was part of what I wanted to say. Another part of what I wanted to talk about. You know, I think I have to tip my hat to Aaron Glenn. I think that for those who don't know, he right now is a defensive coordinator for the Lions, and that might not be for much longer. He looked at the situation with the Patriots, where Jared Mayo was the head coach for 1 year, and the owner of the team, Robert Kraft, decided to relieve him of his services after that one season. A season where I still can't believe it. A season where the team was circling the drain with a 6-time Super Bowl champion. Well, I should say 8, because he did win 2 rings as a defense coordinator, but as a head coach, 6-time Super Bowl champion Bill Belichick, the guy that everybody says is the greatest NFL coach of all time. And the team was circling the drain with him as head coach. And you put this guy who's never been a head coach into the fray. And oh, by the way, we're going to pluck a rookie quarterback for you to lead the team with. And that's nothing against Drake May. He actually looks pretty good, and in his future seems to be promising. More promising than the last one that they decided to put that mantle on in Mac Jones, who now he's the backup quarterback in Duval. Well, not necessarily Duval, but that's where they play. But the Jaguars. You put this guy in an untenable situation, and you fire him after 1 year because, well, you're unimpressed with them going 4-13. You could dig up Bobby Bowden from the grave, and you don't have to dig the body out. You can just roll the casket onto the field. And if he gets 4-13, I'd be surprised. This team is horrible. And you fired him without, because you're thinking, well, we would like to have the same thing that happened in Washington, heck, or even Houston, where you had big time 1-season turnarounds. Well, it happened because you actually had the team build to something before the wonderful mercurial talents of Jayden Daniels and CJ Stroud, respectively, showed up on the scene. Mm-hmm. So is it just a snap of a finger and all of a sudden, oh yeah, prosperity is happening? No, you got to build to that, and you weren't building to that. But I give props to Mr. Aaron Glenn, because he saw that situation, and before Mike Vrabel was announced as the head coach of the team now, he was touted to be interviewed there, and Glenn said, quote,
We gotta pause that.
close quote. I'm proud of you, Aaron. I'm glad you said this is nonsense. Forget that. I'm not going to be a Rooney Rule guy and fulfill your quota, because I know you got your guy. So I hope you get the job that you deserve, my brother, because you deserve that shot, especially after the year you've had. Whew, man. So I hope you actually do find that spot where you're like, I can lead these troops. I can lead these men the way I led this defense in Detroit, because you deserve that.
As long as it's one.
I went to go buy one yesterday, but I wasn't able to with the 18 right away.
Oh, that's great.
So
I love it.
actually, I was getting two.
I hope it actually is recording. Listening to it.
All right, your thoughts before we let the tribe go, sir?
Just talking about these coaches that have available jobs coming off season. Ben Johnson, how's his championship look now? Could have had the opportunity to been there. You could have picked that job last year. They wanted you first. Just goes to show that sometimes the second choice around is a good option. It's
Wait a
always
minute.
good to be.
Did
Ben
he
Johnson had the opportunity to go to Washington before Dan Quinn did.
didn't he call the Josh Harris and Mike Magic Johnson ownership group? Let me see if I can remember this verbatim. That they were quote basketball guys, close quote.
Look at how basketball guys are doing right now. Look at how the basketball guys are doing right now, Cole Johnson. They are now one game away from the Super Bowl. It is just absolutely wild. It's unfathomable at this point. So, yes, and Kellen Moore deserves to be considered out there for a job because their team is in the Final Four as well. So, looking at it for what it is, Ben Johnson, I feel like it's one of those you snooze, you lose situations if you're on the outside looking in, because you should have taken the opportunities that you had last year after the Lions had gotten as far as they did last year, because this year is you really – I can't sit here, and I haven't today, throw really a whole lot of shade except for at Jared Goff, because this whole Lions team to be where they're at with the 18 players that were on IR and in the way that the story was written – what they did this year with 15 wins was remarkable.
It was.
They're just beat up, and Jared Goff made some bad decisions in that game. But you can't take it away from the Commanders to be at this point and what they did. But, geez, man, when we lay it all out there the way it is, it's tough looking at this game for what it is.
Yeah, it is. Oh, before we go,
Ben Johnson, bad choices.
Yeah, Ben Johnson did make a bad choice. Dante was like, look, my snowflake is John Harbaugh. John. How much more did the Ravens need? I'm with you. I would have actually had him straight up if it weren't for the fact you had, unfortunately, Mark Andrews with Crisco hands. He also said, look, I'm proud of my Eagles. Think about that collapse from last year. And now this year, they're one game away from the Super Bowl again. Oh, and he says, anyone want Kellen Moore? The Cowboys do.
Yep.
He said, please take them. Well, hopefully things go well in the Metroplex, and you won't have to worry about him as your offensive coordinator. You never know. But I'm excited for your Commanders. I hope things go well this coming Sunday. Of course, we'll talk and all that. But we enjoyed you guys. Thank you for all of the love that you given us. Now, if you want to find my brother Drew, you can find him on the social media apps. You can find him on search_media with Instagram, search_media with X. You might not be able to find him at _Sotoba. Who knows what TikTok is doing now? But you can also find him at Sotoba_media. That's what I'm saying.
Back up.
It was down Saturday. It was up Sunday. I'm like, make up your mind.
It's up today. Apparently, in the short term that President Trump has been in office, it is now back up.
Which, as of this recording, that has been for a couple of hours. And if you want to reach me, just go to floco.com/page/host Cole Johnson. That is floco.com/page/host Cole Johnson. Well, that is it. Thank you to your tribe. We love you. Thank you for liking. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for hitting the notification bell so you can catch all content that comes from the Sotoba Media YouTube channel and or the Comey Media YouTube channel. We totally appreciate it, and we love all of you. For Drew Willingham, I am Cole Johnson, here to say in parting, as we always do, in life, just like a tackle, keep your head up. And always remember, you got to play until the whistle blows.
And as always, please, from us to you, stay safe out here in these streets.